Hello to everyone. Welcome back to the Brain Trust. This is episode 76. Geopolitics. Saudi Arabia vows retaliation if the United States puts sanctions on it, um, which is the title for today. We have 8 articles to go over. I'm with my co-facilitator, Lionel.
Hello, how's everyone doing today? How you doing today, Mike?
I'm good, brother. Yourself?
I'm well, thanks for asking.
Cool, man. Cool. So, without further ado, let's pull out some of these articles. We'll get to our first article, which is actually a video. There'll be back-to-back videos. So those of you who want to follow along, you can go into the description below the video, and it should have all the document with all the articles in it. So this first video is really based up on Russian military with the repurposing of military hardware for automated and robotic use. We they call it cybernetics. In this, so in this video that you're looking at here, what they're talking about is basically taking um, old military hardware that that is not being used and repurposing it for actual use in the future, future dates, maybe the next year, the next 2 years from now. And it's also an exercise in development. If you can take something from a concept to production, then you know where you stand, technologically speaking. So in this video, I'll just play you a little bit of it. It's remote controlled for the most part. I mean, there's an operator sitting yards away, but there's no actual man in the vehicle. It's a vehicle that would have been manned, but the mechanical controls have been altered for robotic use. And based on the trials that it has been put through, I would say it's 99% ready for production. Um, Accuracy from all of its guns, from 7.2 to 12.6, I mean 12.7, and then 30 millimeter cannon, um, all accurate, dead accurate. If you're looking at this video, you should actually see um, right here where they put a mannequin in the middle, and you have, I believe the gun range is, or the shooting range is probably something like 60, 70 yards, maybe 100 yards at best, which is not that far for battlefield warfare, but it's still a good measure for where your accuracy is from a pre-production platform. I know. Do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, picking back on off what you said, the vehicle is impressive. Like you said, it's unmanned, but there is operating nearby, operating it wirelessly. Um, like I said before, in terms of the submarines being a less unmanned, by this tank being completely unmanned, a lot of the necessary parts that will go in to fit humans and make that more comfortable for them to be in a tank, all of that can be removed. And because all of that is removed, there's more room for other things that can make this tank even more dangerous or lighter or whatever the case may be, which means more missiles, more guns, more bullets, more this and more electronics to make it even more precise. And I saw the tests that show how precise the shooting was. It it was impressive. They put a mannequin between two, I think it was boards, and shot it from a distance, and it was a pretty long distance for it to be that precise. Um, it's impressive. And my question to you were the drones, the two drones that one or two drones that were flying above it. What exactly does those do?
It gives it overhead coverage. So instead of instead of relying on satellite, satellites are very expensive. In case a lot of people here listening don't know, satellite communication is paid for by the kilobyte. So instead of using satellite for reconnaissance, you can use the drones for reconnaissance and get a more accurate shot of your target down or across the field. Um, and it just adds another set of eyes. But the idea of adding a drone to it, basically like a basically like a bird off the back of it, that's actually impressive. You don't really have to worry about the drone being shot down in the middle of the night. Maybe in the daytime you can catch something like that, but a drone flying over at night and giving night vision, so you can add suppressing fire down the line. That's actually an ingenious idea because it's already automated. So because typically in the tank, and I know you probably noticed is that you have your driver, you have your gunner, and then you have your I forget what this other person's name.
The guy that's on the scope, right? I think so.
The commander. You have a
Yeah.
commander, tank commander. You don't have anybody in the tank, so who's gonna be able to see out the periscope or out the opposing sides of the vehicle?
Hmm.
That's where the drone comes in, feeds that information back down to the tank, and actually to the your controls guys and remotely, and they can actually make a better assessment of the target that they need to go after.
Hmm. Also in the video, they showed at I think it was a convention in Russia, and they had other components added onto the tank that can come off, and they were able to be controlled, such as a mini, not a mini tank, but a say a small reconnaissance uh, vehicle, things like
Oh,
that.
you're
That
talking
that
about you're talking about the six wheel on the back.
yes.
Right. So yeah, right. The six wheel on the back is used for reconnaissance and landmine laying. As you see in the video right now, you can see it dropping a little box down. That's a mine.
Hmm. So these tanks can be multi-purpose now. Um, I don't know why they were not more multi-purpose with humans in them, but now it seems like since they're autonomous, the focus is for the tanks to do more than one thing. To do more things, destroy mines, pick up mines. I mean, I lay mines and other things now. It's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive.
Right. hmm Right. And you could actually you could actually do a lot of things with that. Considering the mobility of a tank. I mean, I've seen videos of Russians dropping tanks out of the back of their big jumbo jets, their
Hmm.
military jumbo jets, and having these airbags on them where it can actually the airbags fire out, um, and the parachute deploys, and then there's like a little turbo thrust, not turbo thrust, but propulsion thrust that come out just before it lands as a way to cushion the landing. And
Hmm.
you put a robot like that on the you put five or six of those tanks on the battlefield, you can command the whole field,
Yeah, yeah.
all automated, not worried about human life being sacrificed on your side. I mean, looking at the
Um,
video right now, they have this one is specifically designed as a robot from the ground up. I forget the name of it. The name escapes me
you
right
talking
now,
about
but
the
it's
Victor?
no, this one, the black one,
Oh, okay,
with
okay,
the
okay.
anti-air. anti-air missiles and anti-tank missiles, as well as a 30 millimeter cannon.
Mm,
That's a full robot. That's not that hasn't been converted. That's actually built from the ground up.
okay.
Yeah, to be a robot.
Yes, it's impressive. Yeah, we're starting to see more and more things uh, be autonomized, and now weapons of war being autonomized.
Yeah, I mean, we had a Hangout Monday for space and technology, and we saw what Boston Dynamics can do with their robots. So
And that was impressive by itself.
yeah,
So
I can imagine
yeah,
that. I can imagine that trying to jump on top of a tank. From left to right to left.
well, coming out the back and running on the side of the tank. Oh man.
Right.
So and at a certain point, these technology is going to seem like it's the the development of this technology is going to seem like it's you know jumping forward by years, by leaps and bounds.
And it just goes to show that with a little bit of ingenuity, you can come out with a lot of things. I mean, it was a woman who actually designed the tank, designed the
I saw
robotics
that.
for the tank.
Yeah, she got a
Yeah, she
PhD.
video. Yeah, I wish more of our sisters were like that.
Yeah, me too, man. Me too.
They had, yeah, they added a 57 millimeter cannon to that tank, so that makes it a formidable force. 30 millimeters is one thing, that's kind of standard a standard gun on any tank in any military, but a 57 millimeter, now you're talking about taking down buildings and stuff like that.
Yeah,
You're pretty much
yeah,
taking down any sort of any structures that your adversary may be hiding behind. So no
yeah.
more.
They can't hide behind that brick no more. That cinder block because it'll destroy it.
Right, that's the whole purpose of it, right? To clear it all out.
Hmm.
Yeah, I would not want to be on the opposite side of that robot at all. We already have we already have like Google Home and Amazon Alexa. People are afraid of that. You go up against something like this, you're gonna
Yeah,
run
yeah.
unless you're stupid enough to go up against it.
Well, you always have those type of people.
Hmm.
Yeah, but that was impressive, man.
Yeah, another robot that they've come out with is a mine
So,
clearing. Yeah,
say
another
again.
robot they came out with is a mine clearing tank. A mine clearing tank. So basically a mine sweeper. Um, this tank is actually capable of just clearing out most of the mines without any human interaction at all.
Really? How so?
Yeah, it runs over so it uses the trolley to run over the area, and it also has it
Got some noise here.
yeah, I think that was so.
Okay.
Yeah. I just want to finish up and say that the robotic minesweeper is it's actually a working product in pre-production. It's fully armored plates, and if you look at all the shards on there, um, you see the guy using the remote just from his tablet. Um, that's pretty slick stuff, man. That the Russians are coming out with. What's going on, Jack? What's going on, Zoe?
What's going on, brothers? Quick
All right.
question.
How your brothers doing?
I'm doing good. Quick question. When it comes to production of these, right? How long does it take to manufacture uh, one of these tanks?
Oh, well, keep in mind, like, let me give you an example. When the U.S. was going to war in World War II, they were cranking out tanks. I think like one every other hour, every 90 minutes or something like that on a production line, and that was back then. You think about it now, um, they're probably they'll probably crank those tanks out in the same amount of time, even though they're twice as heavy with what the previous tanks were before in World War II, 70 years ago. So if they can do that back then at 90 to 120 minutes at a time, I can imagine, with all the automated robotic assistants, that they have, that they can actually crank out a whole lot.
Do you think they're gonna sell these to other countries, or just is primarily for Russia's
No,
use?
that's for Russia's use. That's not for anybody else. That's for Russia's use. Russia doesn't have a whole lot of military capacity as it stands. They have a lot of guys, but if you don't have enough armor and vehicles to actually to take on that western flank of NATO coming in across the border, and plus Russia is pretty flat, so they don't have a whole lot of mountains and before you get to Moscow. So if there was going to be a blitzkrieg, it would start right from their western flank, right in St. Petersburg. So and they would take Moscow pretty quickly. But I believe Russia has already set up like tank traps and all types of obstacles to keep NATO from coming in 100%. But that's the sort of tactics that they have to use is relying on automation and technology and stop putting humans on the battlefield because you can lose a whole bunch of guys. You lose a whole brigade with enough tanks coming in and enough artillery being fired.
Yeah, I noticed that because Russia has a big push for like more of a defense stance in military opposed to offense, right? So it's like I was trying to wonder why there's so much of a push for defense, with tanks and air defense or whatnot. So uh, I guess you just answered my question there. For other countries to compete, because it seems like Russia's kind of leading that as far as tanks and something like that. What are other countries? What do other countries need to do to compete with Russia? Because they're cranking these out, and the technology coming out with these is really quick. So what do other countries need to do to compete?
Well, they're not going to compete, right? So Russia is the number two supplier of military hardware next to the United States. So if they don't get it from the United States, they get it from Russia, especially at one third of the cost. You can get like I think something like 4 or 5 tanks from Russia for the cost of a one American tank. So if you're a country that has a small military budget, then yeah, that makes a lot of sense. A lot of countries don't have the same military budget as the United States, so they don't have the willpower to go out there and just willy nilly spend their money. Um, they have to figure out whether or not they're going to feed their people versus they're going to buy some military hardware. And usually, it's the countries with the most resources are the ones who buy the most hardware. Russia has a lot of resources, lots of resources, just like Africa does. So they have a urgency to protect all those resources and supply chain distribution. So
So so hearing that is so it seems like to me the country with the most resources can get it done. So I'm trying to figure out like well I guess it's a segue, but as far as I know they're investing in Africa, right? So do you think this is going to boost African nations military capabilities as well? Seeing that obviously I don't know if they're gonna hand over some of their technology to them, but do you foresee that happening?
they've Africa makes its own hardware. It's not the best hardware, but they do make some hardware. Now they have bought Russian hardware in the past, uh, but since their transition in the last decade, decade and a half, um, the focus has been on more human development than military development. So a lot of African countries really don't need. They're not at war with anybody, so to speak, right? No African country is at war with another outsider at this point. NATO already bombed Libya, and that's over and done with. South Africa is not at war with anybody. Egypt is not at war with anybody in particular. They haven't had a war or a battle since Yemen in '79, if I remember correctly. Um, yeah, it's just one of those things. It's peacetime in Africa, so there's really no need for Africa to buy a whole lot of big, gargantuous military hardware. But there's a few countries in Africa that do have the S-400 surface-to-air missile system, um, mostly in the north, but because there's a lot of infighting going on up there as well. So.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay, that's good stuff then.
Mhm. Well, let me jump to the next video. The next video is about Russia's Tor M2. It's a surface to air missile caterpillar. Let me play the video a little bit. This system is used to take down cruise missiles, specifically to take down cruise missiles and other lob objects. What happened in Syria when they sent 90 something cruise missiles from their from the U.S. warships? Syria didn't have any real defense system capable of stopping all those missiles. You can stop some, but you can't stop all. And it's very expensive to fire a missile. I want to say, the bare minimum, for a missile can cost anywhere between $10,000 and $100,000. If you're on the defensive side, that's very costly. So you have to come up with other measures. Russia's plan is to have this Tor M2 surface-to-air missile system put in place, and to use that to stop any incoming onslaught of cruise missiles. Because you don't fire one or two cruise missiles; you fire a dozen at a time. And unfortunately, Syria took a very hard blow to their logistics facilities because they were, didn't have the capabilities. But this Tor M2 missile system is actually really designed to protect most of your facilities on the fly. It doesn't stop and fire; it fires while it's going. If anybody's watching the video right now, they can see it. Excellent demonstration of this, SAM being put to use. Let's see if I can fast forward to it. Here we go, right
Yeah, that documentary is very interesting, man. Just seeing the accuracy and just seeing how they work, right? Just with uh, if you have, I think they had like 16 lined up, and they kind of explained like, let's say there was a attack on all sides, right? How how it deducts from how it deducts which ones are most threat, right? And then works its way from there. So um, the seeing the programming in that, right? And it's what they have in place, man. It's remarkable. They're really
Yeah,
taking
it's a
things
big
to the next
market.
level.
Yeah, it's a big
Well,
market. I mean, the United States has some of the most top level stuff, but it's interesting to see what the Russians are doing when you see what your adversaries or what other nations are doing with the little bit that they have to offer.
Typically does
Right. So,
the oh, can you hear me?
go ahead. So, yeah, go ahead. So we can hear
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, so the tour, I think it's usually aren't they don't they accompany like the S300s and S400s?
Yeah, it's a multi-tier system.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean with the Russians, that's their I mean, lack of a better word, that's their shit, the building anti-aircraft, missiles. Because just like what you mentioned earlier, their western border is pretty flat. And I mean, people may call it Russian paranoia or whatever, but there's a reason why they build these systems because they fear that NATO will, run right through the Russian homeland. Hence why they were hence why they were upset of NATO expansion. And you can't really blame them because Russia has been repeatedly been invaded throughout their history. So it's ingrained in them. People may call it, typical Russian paranoia, but if you look at the Russian mindset, look at their history, it explains why they build these defense systems, why their foreign policy is the way it is. So it's pretty interesting. And all this is to
Yeah,
counter Western tech. So yeah.
right, right, right. Absolutely, great points. I wish black people were more like-minded as the Russians were. And this is a
Yeah,
16 battery system. Go ahead.
no, yeah, but basically never again. I've always said that I wish black people would have the same mindset as the Israelis or Russians, that, never again, like that they never again want to be oppressed. But I don't know. Maybe with Africa being developed, that'll change. I don't know. We'll see.
I think the problem with black people, and I don't want to get too far off topic, but I think the problem with black people in relation to what you say with about the Jews or in Israel and the Russians is that black people don't have their own autonomy, right? There's no way to there's no way to govern yourself, right? You're always being, it's either your oppressor has his foot on your neck, or some gynocentric entity has their foot on your neck, right? So there's no way to freely think for yourself. And I've talked about this before, but the lack of complex thought leads to lack of innovation. So we don't see the necessity to innovate because we're not allowed to have free thought, freedom of complex thought. And it's unfortunate because there's a whole lot of things that came out of slavery during the Reconstruction era where black men were thinking. They were actually inventing things, brakes for cars, filament for lights, the telephone, the modern day telephone, just a whole litany of things that black men had came out with that, you know, were actually innovative. And you were allowed to think that way back then because there was a lot of segregation. Whereas today, I think integration really screwed black people over.
Yeah, very true. Very
So
true.
what do you think black people could do now, right? Just like right now to create their own economy. Just what do you, or just to pretty much learn from the mistakes that of things that happened in the past, right? Once they came out of slavery, because there was a lot of inventions created by blacks, right? So what from that learning lesson of the history, right? What could they do differently now to move forward in a positive light?
Uh, the first thing that in reference to these videos that we're going over tonight, you have to be able to invent things that's going to benefit you for the long term. The Russians see the necessity to. The Russians can't build a smartphone to save their life, but they can build military hardware like nobody else can, even better than the United States can. And they have a space program that is top notch, even better than the United States. So why is it that the Russians have the wherewithal to actually think on that level and innovate on that level, but black people do not, even though they live in a first world nation, right? So there's a lot of questions that still need to be answered. And I think we should have a separate hangout just on that alone. Black people just not seeing the necessity to build military hardware to aid not just themselves in America, right? And you imagine black people having their own factories in Detroit or in the Rust Belt, cranking out some decent hardware and just having this sort of cachet of armaments in case something does happen. Stashing it in New Mexico or stashing it in Arizona somewhere. Stashing it in Nevada or something like that. Having regional sites set up where they can just store all their vehicles. I don't know, man. It's just one of those things where you have to wonder how some black people think. But that's a whole nother topic for another night. This vehicle is actually capable of taking down softballs. So objects the size of softballs at something like 1,000 feet. So shows you the capabilities that it does have. What's going on, complex?
Yeah, I think.
Complex design.
Yeah, and this is the reason
what's
why
good,
I don't.
gentlemen? What's good, everyone?
Oh.
It was good, brother. Go ahead, Jack.
Oh, that was Zoe. Go ahead.
Oh, go
Oh
ahead,
yeah.
Zoe. Go ahead, Zoe.
Yeah. Just like I was saying that I think that this is one of my reasons why I don't think World War III will happen, because as advanced as NATO is with their technology, they don't want that smoke because they know what the Russians are capable of. They don't want to have a third world war, not because of nuclear weapons only, but just that the cost will be too high, and They know that these Russian weapon system can do severe damage, and we all know that Western countries can't really handle high casualties. So there's no stomach for it. As much as they won't want to put, sanctions on Russia or want to pressure Russia to control its bad behavior, they're not going to push too far for a conventional war with Russia. It's not worth it.
No, and because there's a military industrial complex involved in this, right? So everybody's making money inside Russia because there's a necessity to keep creating defensive technologies and armaments so that they can stay alive. But if they decide to go to war, it could be the last time that they ever develop anything. So proxy wars have been mostly how the United States engaged Russia and how Russia responds to it. What happened in Syria was a proxy war. You sent these guys in there. You sent 130,000 terrorists in there to take down Russia's best adversary. I mean, not best adversary, but best partner, which is Syria, which is basically a commonwealth of the Soviet Union at the time. They built those naval ports and airports in Syria during 1970s, early 1970s. So there was an urgency to protect Syria because Syria was, the last bastion of Russia's foreign power, right? So Russia doesn't have any military bases outside of Russia other than Syria. So why not protect what you have? Because that's the only access that you have to the Mediterranean. Um, from a naval perspective, even then, even though use you can utilize air power to get around that, but if your sea lift capabilities are not there, then you're kind of screwed. You need sea lift capabilities to have a full fledged military.
Well, I have another question aside from the for that, for how technology wise, how are they able to these missiles able to hit the size of a softball? Like, what dictates the accuracy of these missiles? Like, is it I understand the technology, but what is it that's able to do that?
The camera, if you look at the video, there was two cameras set up on it. There's a thermal camera and there's a television camera. I think it uses VHF frequencies. I think that's what they call very high frequency in UHF, which is a ultra high frequency. It can basically scan a very large area to determine the speed of the object is moving at the size of the object and the height of it as well. So using all those complex models, they can actually generate a an equation to take out a target, and it does more than one at a time. So it can count something like I think like 24 targets at a time, which is a lot for a missile system.
Yeah. So, what type of computer system is that? Because like, 'cause that's a lot of computing you have to do, right? So it's like, what type of computer system you think they use to do that?
All that stuff is custom made, but you can do most of the technology inside your smartphone or your tablet is more than enough to actually come up with those complex computations, right? Um, you look at your average computer right now, you you can run Chrome, you can run YouTube, you can run a battery of applications at once, and it's not slowing down at all, right? So there's nothing to say that a application specific system can't target a 24 objects at a time.
So pretty much, it sounds to me that the technology wise, it's something that uh, somebody else can figure out. It's not like you need to have um, again, like just like we talking about going doing the space program. There's computers you can find that can able to calculate the mathematical problems to get certain things done. So it's like, all right. So it's not like something that we had to pull out too much resource to get it done to create our own tank or to create our own guided missile. So it sounds like to me, this is something that we can get into. It's not too complex that we can't figure out.
Right. It can be done. It can be done. You put enough black people in one room, they'll figure it out. Go ahead, Complex.
I was gonna say there's just there's just too many tools available in terms of open source technology, 3D printed manufacturing, limited small scale manufacturing processes, that greatly reduce the cost of R&D for, developed vehicles and other types of, things that are of proprietary design. The challenge is in creating a method of efficiency. That's the challenge. That's what all companies do. In order to maximize profits, is to produce the best high quality product at the minimal price you can, given the quality you're aiming for. So, it's just like what Mike said, man. It involves engaging complex thought. It's nothing that some brain power can't hash out in a room over some hours.
The way that these tour missiles are launched from their mobile silos, first they're launched, then you see much like a spacecraft in space doing little small jets of fuel to correct its path. These missiles have that at the top, at the tip, to keep them centered.
Thrusters.
Yeah, thrusters. I couldn't remember that word for thrusters, to keep them straight. And once they get to a certain height, the afterburners turn on. That is, that's to me. I don't know why I feel this way about that. To me, that's next level. That's next level in my and this
Yeah, I know.
vehicle, this
Yeah,
all-terrain vehicle. Oh man,
yeah. They started testing those in the North Pole. Believe it or not, because the Russians captured the North Pole a few years ago. But these the way that they're air launched out is that I want to say that they use some kind of magnetic thruster, a magnetic a launcher to pop these things out. Because when you look at it, it pops out. It doesn't actually use any sort of fire propulsion, any liquid fire propulsion to get out of it. So it seems like it's on a spring loaded mechanism where it can just pop it out, and then the air motors, the motors can actually change the direction just in enough time. That takes a lot of technology, believe it or not, for people listening. That just to get that thing out of the silo itself is not easy, because those things are heavy. Those missiles are pretty heavy. I think they weigh something like a couple hundred pounds. You try to take a boulder and toss it up in the air and see how far it goes.
That's what I was thinking. I'm thinking like,
And then get it to launch on trajectory.
yeah,
Toss it up in there and then get it to launch on trajectory.
Hmm.
yeah. I was thinking like how heavy they were because I noticed that too. That this way it sprung up, and then you saw like four burners, right? Kind of like shot it up and turned it. Then the afterburners kicked off. But yo, when I watched the video, like that, I think it's pretty quick, man. It's not like it was probably like what are the speeds of those missiles?
800 kilometers a second or something like that.
That's fast.
Yeah, it's definitely fast. It's fast enough for it to reach its target. But you have other missiles that are moving in a lot faster, that are moving at Mach 1 speed. So do you have anything else you want to add to this?
I mean, this essentially makes Russia's air defense system basically almost impenetrable. Like that's, I mean, that 800 kilometers. That's how fast that thing is. Sheesh.
They actually have faster missiles than that. I don't know if you've ever seen the Satan. The Satan missile is actually much faster than that. I think it moves at something like 5,000 kilometers a second or something to that effect. It's like Mach 2 or Mach 3 speeds. It's really fast.
Damn.
But they
Quick.
shoot that. No, I'm saying, do they shoot that off while they're going at a certain speed on a jet, or that's just from 0 to 100 just goes that fast? Or 0 to that speed?
Zero, yeah, 0 to that speed, from nothing to something, right?
Wow.
And that's with nuclear warheads, right? That's so they can deliver that payload out real quick. By the time you figure out that it's coming, you know, it's already game over.
Like if they put that on it, like if they use that Satan missile as like an EMP, so if it's that quick, by the time we even notice, like the electrical grid is just shut down, and I guess it'd be too late to respond. I mean, I know we have nuclear subs that would probably respond back, but it's like that would be a devastating blow.
When you're moving at that speed, you really don't have a whole lot of time to react. I mean, yeah, you can shoot something at it, but the chances of you hitting it is like 1 in 100, right? It's just not easy, especially if it's moving at that speed. And plus, it's carrying nuclear warheads in it. You know, I think it has something like 16 nuclear warheads in there, and you have to figure out which one of those are actually accurate. So you have to shoot down every single one of them. But that's just the vehicle delivering the payload.
That was very interesting. Very interesting.
Do
we'll
we have a
hang out on that next week?
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, we have a defense of that, because like I never
That's what
see
THAAD is
U.S.
for.
Okay.
Yeah, THAAD means terminal high acceleration defense, high aerial defense. That's what it stands for, THAAD. So that's made to take down that Russian Satan missile, as well as the satellite delivered missiles as well, because some of those satellites do have missiles and nuclear missiles inside them that can take out regions of a country. Anyways, let's go on to our next article. So this next article is from Fox News. Saudi Arabia vows to retaliate if Trump follows through on severe punishment threat over Khashoggi. So this is in relation to the Saudi journalist that was kidnapped and not actually found. As of right now, we don't know where his body is. Although there has been reports released that it's been severed. So there's no real way to tell what's going on. But basically, in this article from Fox News, they're talking about the Saudi monarchy is ready to retaliate with greater action if the Trump administration punishes the country for apparently pre-planned murder of a dissident in the Turkish embassy on Turkish soil. What's happening now is, as of recently, Saudi Arabia is actually admitting that this guy came inside their consulate inside Turkey, looking for some marriage papers, and never came back out. The CCTV cameras never showed this guy coming back out of the consulate. And Saudi Arabia at first said that we don't know. He did leave the consulate. We don't know where he is. He left already. And then come to find out, as of this morning, this guy was inside the consulate and never came out. And now it's also coming out the last few hours is that the Saudi Arabian bodyguards, who has not been known yet, has did away with this man's body through interrogation. Where his body is, nobody really knows. But at this point, Saudi Arabia is in hot water, and it happened on Turkish soil, so that makes it a international crime. And Turkey wants restitution and some action against Saudi Arabia for this. And Turkey and Saudi Arabia are not friends; they are actually adversaries, politically speaking. What
Mm.
could happen out of all of this is we can go back to what happened in 1973 when Saudi Arabia actually caused a spike in oil prices and gas prices by playing around with the refineries and threatening Israel at the time during the Yom Kippur War. And gas prices back then went up to $10 a gallon. If Saudi Arabia wants to retaliate against the United States, you could very well see the price of oil per barrel shoot up to $140, like Dollar Oil talked about in the past. Anybody else have anything else you want to add to this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say this real quick. In terms of Saudi Arabia and Turkey, they don't, they are not, morally speaking, they not in a position um, to with whatever Turkey does, whatever sanctions Turkey puts on them. In terms of Saudi Arabia and America, the only thing that they can hold over America is oil. That's the only thing. If it wasn't oil, Saudi Arabia doesn't is is not in a position to retaliate against anybody over this, over the killing of Khashoggi on Turkey soil. So I don't know how far Saudi uh, Arabia and MBS is gonna get with whatever retaliation they say um, they're gonna put on countries because they killed somebody else in another country. I don't know how far they think they're gonna get. I don't know how far they. I don't know what they think they're gonna achieve, but good luck with that.
And I'd like to add something else too. Uh, I guess the Saudi Arabia can use their oil as a weapon, but the thing is, it'll be cutting their nose, spite their face if they do it. To be honest, because this is totally different from what it was in the 1970s. You know, um, yes, if they were to like shut off the oil would go up like $250 a barrel, but it would hurt them even more because back because what's different now is they're fighting a very expensive war in Yemen. They need that oil to run. They need that money. Um, they also, MBS is spending tons of cash trying to reform the country economically, which is failing anyway because of his repeated stupid mistakes, including the Qatar blockade, the Ritz-Carlton affair, where he basically ran up and extorted $100 billion from Saudi princes and businessmen. So what that did was a lot of Saudi elites basically parked their cash out of Saudi Arabia. They're not investing in the country. Foreign investment dropped from like I think 7.6 billion to 1.6 billion or something like that. But the main point is like yeah, they could try to shut off the oil. Yes, it would probably wreck the global economy, but it would hurt them more. Now I don't think that's going to happen. Trump is probably not going to do anything, but Congress seemed very serious. Like they seem very serious. They want to do something to hurt Saudi Arabia. I don't think they can put sanctions. More than likely, what they would do is probably cut off funding for the Pentagon to help them in the war in Yemen. I guess that's the most they can do to hurt them. But I think this murder is just another long list of stupid mistakes that MBS is doing. That is not only harming him, but is harming the House of Saud. Like I think this is just another chink in his armor that if he goes down, he's gonna bring the House of Saud in, and that's going to happen fairly soon. I'm not saying it's gonna happen a year from now, or 2 years from now, but it's just everything's just building up. It's building up to something where when they fall, it's gonna be a pretty precipitous collapse. Like it's gonna be a pretty bloody collapse because we all know Saudi Arabia has tribal attention. The royal family members don't like each other. MBS has created animosity with the royal family. There's Shiites in the eastern provinces. There's Shiites in the border with Yemen. It's it's basically, if things fall apart there, it's just going to be worse than anything we've seen in the region thus far. So this Khashoggi murder, from my perspective, is just another thing that's building up to the collapse of the House of Saud, basically. Yeah.
Yeah. Saudi Arabia is actually politically fragile, so any sort of tension, any sort of uprising could actually cause it to collapse overnight. The IPO for Aramco actually did not do very well, so that was a failure on their part. And as well as this NEOM project that's supposed to happen in outside of Mecca and Medina, up in the north of Saudi Arabia, is not getting enough funding and investment. They're running out of cash every day, fighting this war, and as well as funding operations overseas. It just doesn't seem like a big return on investment for them. I think what they can do is they can pull their investments out of the United States, because they do fund a lot of operations inside the United States, as well as they own a lot of property and debt that the United States has. So if they pull out, that could be like it could play like Jenga, where you pull out one of the blocks, and there's a potential that this, potential that the American economic fabric could start to collapse too. You may see prices start to shoot up. You're already starting to see potato chip prices going up because of some of the tariffs that the United States has on China and China has on the United States. The geopolitical landscape is very fragile right now, and something to be mindful of, that this whole thing over a journalist can actually spiral out of control.
But they've been mismanaging their money for a while, since you can even argue since they got they're starting to get since they started to get billions of dollars from oil. Because isn't don't they have the cradle to grave social security, or what is the cradle to grave? Every citizen get money in their country from the time they born to the time they die, something to that effect.
I think that might be for a certain class of people. Maybe
Okay,
Zoe might know more about that.
okay, but what Zoe said, they've been taking their own family's money to fund that. Now the irony, the great irony of all this is Khashoggi was a journalist that spoke out against Saudi Arabia's government. Now, because they killed him, that his killing will be the very thing that will destabilize their government. That's the great irony of all this.
Yeah, you're right about that too. And also, there's probably members of the royal family that probably don't like that MBS did this killing too. You have to understand, when his father became king, because the way it works in Saudi society, because the founder Ibn Saud, when he basically united all the tribes, but he basically united them through the bed. Basically, he went to a tribal leader and said, "All right, listen, you know, you serve me. Just give me your daughter, and then your grandson will probably become king." So what it was is, like, he married all these tribal leaders' daughters, and then if and each of those sons would become king. So the way it would work is, this king dies, and then his brother becomes king, and then he would make his half brother king. It was basically try to share, the crown, so that way it would keep things easy. But Ben Salman's father changed all that. He basically made his son crown prince. He kicked off his nephew, who had close ties with Western intelligence and all that. He was known as was capable of the job more. So that created some animosity. You have the whole Ritz Carlton thing, where basically Saud basically pulled jokes on all the Saudi princes, and at least said, "Listen, cough up $100 billion, or are you dead?" Basically, and he tortured them for days, and then they coughed it up. The war in Yemen, a lot of people in the royal family was not for it, because what they feared was that they'll get sucked in, because Yemen is a graveyard of empires. Like, it's very hard to conquer. terrible, and hence why it's still stuck in them and they haven't had a victory. So this killing too would probably piss off many of these royal family members. Like, yo, what the fuck what's this dude doing? Like this MBS dude is doing way too much. So I bet a lot of them are like mad. But the only thing that's preventing them from making a move on MBS is two things. Like this guy, he's basically the defense minister and he runs the economy. So he basically pays their check. I think when he became crown prince or whatever, I think double or triple their pay or something. So he got them in their pocket for now. And he has the youth. That's why he did all these reforms of bringing movies, allowing men and women to go to wrestling events, soccer games. So the Saudi youth see themselves in him. It's like, yeah, he's young, he's dynamic, but the thing is, he promised the youth so much that he's going to reform the economy that all his actions, it's kind of ironic, is undermining that main thing. So if they see no reforms and the economy takes a turn, which it will in a couple of years, because they're burning through all their money real fast, and the military doesn't see their money getting because if there's not much investment in the country. They're getting less money. They're getting less pay. You're gonna start seeing cracks forming. So it's a run against time. That's why he made that Vision 2030, which is basically like 12 years from now. But that's unrealistic. He's all bullshit basically. They're gonna see right through him, and it's gonna be real ugly. It's gonna be real ugly when that happens. It's gonna be really really ugly, and I don't think. And the scary thing is, nobody in the West has any plans on what to do if that were to happen. Because if the Saudi government, if Saudi society were to collapse, it's going to collapse real quick. Like it's going to happen real fast, and we're going to be like, oh, what are we going to do? And on top of that, regional players are going to get involved. Turkey will want to secure Mecca, Medina. Iran will be like, oh, bet we're going to rescue our Shiite brothers, and it's just going to be a bloodbath, basically, all because of MBS. He basically broken all norms and everything, and it's gonna get real bad, real bad. I wouldn't say a year or 2 years, but like 3 to 5 years. If he doesn't keep his promises and shit gets ugly over there, concerning the economy, it's gonna get real bad, really, really bad.
So what do you brothers think
go ahead.
is? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I know they want to say anything. Okay.
No, I don't have anything.
Oh, go ahead, Jack.
Well, I was gonna say, what do you brothers think was his line of reasoning, like his thought on this whole thing? Because it kind of was, it just was not a good move. And also, what do you think is gonna affect not his, but like the country's perception throughout in the future? Because I saw another article in Yemen, right? I think it's like over 15 million people are starving out there. They're murdering children every day, right? So now their perception throughout the world is like not good. So what do you think is going to happen to them? How do you think it's going to play out as far as international relations? Because they're committing war crimes. They're doing atrocious things throughout in certain countries. So what do you think is going to play out?
Well, so here's the top level, right? And I think Zoe touched on this, that the political fragility would actually send a spiraling out into chaos overnight. They have an undereducated demographic of people, similar to how Black people in the United States don't have the proper education to actually fend for themselves, so they're very dependent upon the government. Same thing in Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia purposely keeps their people undereducated so that they can't challenge the government. And what happens here is they have to import labor. So they import their skill set, their IT people, their utility people, all their blue collar guys, white collar guys. Well, I should say white collar, but white blue collar and gray collar guys have to be imported in from the Philippines, from Pakistan and all these other Muslim countries. They have to bring these people in, and they're basically used as contractors to build up the economy there. And everybody else who's a Saudi citizenship, they're basically just a bunch of people just walking around like nothing else to do. So when MBS came in, he wanted to create all of these millennial, sort of ideals for their population to keep them pacified. Same thing happens in the black community. You get, the Democratic Party comes in and they basically pacify people with welfare and other Section 8 and other types of benefits, and black people are just basically quiet about it. They don't really say much. And to your point, how this would affect them internationally, this would hurt them in the United Nations because you have a lot of countries that are already against you anyway. So you're gonna have to buy your way out, and you're running out of money, and you're running out of time, and it's only a matter of time. So I think you'll probably see Saudi Arabia pull out of Yemen probably by January, and you'll probably see the war in Syria just come to a complete stop by January as well. The Saudi administration actually is going to be meeting with Moscow in the next day or so, if they haven't already met already, about Syria. This is a very good time because Saudi Arabia is very vulnerable on the international stage. So if Moscow can actually get Riyadh to actually back out of Syria and stop funding terrorists, and kind of close off those borders, that can spell a lot of change, in the Middle East. And then when you factor in what's happening with Yemen, there's a high probability that you'll see a lot of ICC cases come against Saudi Arabia, and the possibility of reparations. Yemenis can actually fight for reparations at this point. This would be a perfect time for them to fight for that.
To touch off that point, what's going to do for them internationally? It's going to affect their bottom line basically, because foreign investment was dropping because of the Ritz-Carlton affair. Like I said, I read somewhere in 2006 they had 7.6 billion foreign investment, but then that dropped significantly to 1.6 or 1.7 billion. That's a big drop. With this thing, you already see companies pulling out of investing in Saudi Arabia, so their investment is going to drop. Foreign investment is probably going to drop to nil, basically, unless the Chinese want to come in. But I don't know. I guess the Chinese doesn't want to pick a side between Saudi Arabia or Iran. But and also you have domestic investment is dropping too, because as I explained before, the Ritz-Carlton thing has made many Saudi elites be like, yo, this MBS guy's bugging. I'm putting my money in London, in Paris, in the New York, in the United States, because what if he comes up at us against us, yo, give me 200 billion, give me 300 billion. So that's going to affect their bottom line. This murder is going to affect their bottom line. In regards to the war in Yemen, I disagree with you that the war will end in January, because for the Saudis, I kind of don't blame them for getting into Yemen, because Yemen is their soft underbelly. The Houthis took over Sana'a, so they had to react, but they were way too confident, overconfident. They thought the war was going to end in 3 months, but then now it's going on for 3 more years. Yemeni society is much more fractured than it was before. There's 15 million people starving over there. It basically, just like that movie with Omar Epps, they're in too deep. If they pull out, it's going to be an embarrassment. What are they going to tell their people? The Houthis going to be looking out for blood, because if they pull out of Yemen, the Houthis going to be like, all right, we're going to go. They're going to cross the border. I mean, you already see videos on YouTube. They already crossed the border and raid, the border regions of Saudi Arabia, which has Shiites, which is why the Saudis is not going to pull out, because if they pull out, the Houthis are going to go to those regions, and what you're going to have an insurrection in those provinces. The way it's going to play out from how what's going to happen is just you're going to see less foreign and domestic investment. Is going to create animosity, but as long as MBS has the support of the Saudi youth and the military, he'll be eyed in the short term, but in the long term now. And another thing to touch off the point of the Saudi, Saudi citizens not educated properly. They're highly undereducated, and they're educated in Wahhabist ideology. But if the Wahhabist cleric says that, yo, the House of Saud is not a house that we should serve, who do you think is gonna say, yo, we can make your lives better? ISIS, Al Qaeda. You know what I'm saying? That those guys are on the cut in Saudi Arabia, waiting for this to happen. They hate, as much as they get some support from Saudi princes, they hate the house, the Saudi royal family, and they're just waiting for that right time. And if that shit pops off, it's gonna get ugly real fast because a lot of people in Saudi Arabia support Al Qaeda and ISIS. I mean, at the height when ISIS was rampaging through Iraq, you had on social media like Saudi generals posting support for the Islamic State. It was crazy, and the Saudi government had to cut that off because it was like, oh snap, that they didn't want no one else to see that. So, for the way things are going, if he doesn't keep his promises and the economy gets bad, they go bankrupt. The first sign you'll see if things starts getting ugly is when you see prison breaks. When those prison breaks happen, those Al Qaeda ISIS dudes get out those prisons, it's a wrap. Because that's what happened in Iraq. Those prison riots happened and they escaped. They all linked up, and then we saw what happened. And but it will be worse in Saudi Arabia. It would be really, really, really ugly, real ugly, and we're not prepared for that.
Anti-gravity, have anything you want to add?
No, I think he put it very well. I don't know what the brother's name is, Zoe, I think. But yeah, I have to agree with him. But I'd only add one part, which would be that they do support Al Qaeda and they fund them, but also there's I believe they're called Al Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula or something to that effect. That's across the border. Was that
AQUP or AQAUP is the
what would it stand for? Al Qaeda of the Arab. Oh, okay. Yeah, those guys, they're in the south of Saudi Arabia, near the mountainous, very desert regions between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, and also North Yemen. So those guys, they don't support. Those guys are also fighting against the Houthi rebels for control over Yemen, and they're not, in a way, not affiliated with Saudi Arabia. So that's also another risk, if they happen to pull out. But I think I agree with almost all the points that Zoe made.
Yeah, and also keep in mind that Saudi Arabia has made too many blunders. The kidnapping of the Lebanese prime minister, the gaffe with Canadian ambassador, the threatening of bringing 9/11 to Canada. What has the Mounties ever done to anybody? I mean, Canadian bacon for everyone. I mean, what's really going on with that? But my point here is that you have
Canadian scissor.
You have a country that's basically spinning on its own axis and doesn't really have a real good foreign policy, right? If I remember correctly, they're funding ISIS of West Africa, which is Boko Haram, and many of the other Al-Qaeda,
ISIS, Al-Shabaab, all kinds.
Yeah. There's a dozen factions inside Africa that if I remember correctly, the Saudi Arabia is or has funded in the past. And I have no love for them if that's the case. If that's to be accurate. So seeing them go down in flames would not hurt me at all, and I would not lose sleep over it. But we can
also they're the pariah of the Muslim world as well, and not so much because of the Wahhabism, but because they're in bed with Israel. So that really angers everyone around the Muslim world. That of all the people, that the Saudis are in bed with basically Muslims' arch nemesis, the Israeli state.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of men are embedded with each other in the manosphere. So, but So this next article is from Press TV. Lindsey Graham is advising the Saudi Arabia to dump MBS and replace him with better leaders. keep in mind that the United States has put sanctions on Russia for allegedly interfering with their political process, and now you have Lindsey Graham, advising to interfere in the political process or the monarchy process, for Saudi Arabia, and it's just hilarious to see this guy who's supposed to be a Republican always seems to be elected. I don't know who keeps voting for him, but he basically says he's not going back to Saudi Arabia. He's not supporting them, and that he wants to put sanctions on Saudi Arabia because of this, right? I just find that interesting. You want to put sanctions on Saudi Arabia over a journalist, but you don't want to put sanctions on Saudi Arabia for bombing, Yemen and sending 15 million people into a death spiral. Where's your moral compass on this? Other people, please jump in on the panel.
Well, because those crazy Persians. That's why they're afraid of those crazy Persians, so they'll tolerate Saudi Arabia's actions in Yemen. What Lindsey Graham is saying is like, that they should choose a better leader for like MBS got to go. I think it's just him just trying to, because look at that picture. He tries to like over exaggerate shit, try to show that he's serious when he really isn't. The reason why they wouldn't put sanctions on Saudi Arabia for Yemen is the proxy war against Iran. That they see Iran as a greater threat, and for good reason. I mean, the Iranian people are resilient. I mean, years under sanctions, and they're still powerful. And they fear that if Iran ever got access to, advanced weaponry, that they would wipe the floor of Saudi Arabia, wipe the floor of all those Persian Gulf states. I guess right now with this killing of Khashoggi, it was blatant. It was basically in a Turkish consulate, and it's just another laundry list of MBS's arrogant and stupid decisions. And I guess anti-gravity, he asked like, why would MBS do this? Basically, because he's gotten away with so much. He's gotten away with so much. Also, you have to understand. You have to read his profile. He represents the third royal family generation in Saudi society. So he grew up comfortable. He's basically the king of Saudi Arabia's favorite son. He's spoiled. He always gets his way. He's arrogant. So the way Saudi Arabia foreign policy is right now basically reflects MBS's personality, and the U.S. tolerated it because, hey, as long as we support them to stop Iran, that's all that matters. But the way this murder was done brazenly and practically brutally, because I read somewhere today that basically he was dismembered alive. I mean, that's pretty horrific. But I don't think they're going to do any sanctions anyway. But I think this is a big rift between the United States, but probably no sanctions. Probably just going to cut funding for their war in Yemen. That's pretty much it, because the U.S. dollar is dependent on oil. So if Saudi Arabia were to pull back, it would hurt the Saudi economy if the dollar would completely crash. So I think it's just posturing and Lindsey Graham's part.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think Trump has already made clear that he's backing whatever cover story that they give him, and also his son or son-in-law Kushner, he's in bed with them for business deals with his family, the Kushner family, as well as the Trump organization. So nothing is going to happen. That's at least that's my estimation.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think nothing major is going to happen. I think Congress can just do is cut funding for the war in Yemen. The Pentagon would just stop supporting Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, which would be a major hamper on the Saudis' effort to win that. Well, they're never going to win that war because it's a graveyard of empires, Yemen, as it is with Afghanistan. But I think nothing international is going to happen much. no sanctions going to be hurled at Saudi Arabia. I think it's more what's going to happen is you got to look at what no one's looking like at the bottom line and at what's going on internally in Saudi Arabia. Because I can bet you this much, I don't think MBS is worried about what the U.S. is going to do regarding sanctions. I bet he's more worried like what the royal family is going to do. And I don't know if you guys read this, like at night, MBS, like even like the intelligence community has reported on this. He's so paranoid. He sleeps at a yacht right off the coast of Jeddah at night because he's paranoid about assassinations and a coup. So I think he's more worried about his position than anything else, which goes to show like he's reaching at his wit's end, and he's like what 30 something years old and he's already paranoid. So that's not a good sign. If this guy's sleeping in a yacht at night, not at the palace.
Yeah, 33. Jack, you have anything you want to add? I know. I think Jack is driving. Lino, you have anything you want to add? All right, we'll move on to the next article. So next article, press TV again. U.S. pastor Brunson lawyer challenges Turkish jail sentence. So Turkey had released this pastor Andrew Brunson from jail for being suspected of being involved with the PKK in the overthrow, the coup attempt back in 2016. What we're seeing now is the changing of trajectory, right? So Turkey was holding on to this guy. United States government decided to put sanctions on a couple of Turkish officials, which sent the lira, the Turkish dollar, into spiral and almost crashed their economy temporarily. That was hurting them big time. So there has to be some kind of recovery methods in place. Turkey decided to not buy Apple products and other Western products. That actually works in their favor. That's an actually good position. Turkey has something like 40 to 60 million people inside their country, and it's a big economy. Their trade value with the United States is something like $8 to $9 billion a year, whereas their trade with Europe and Russia is something like 30 to 40 billion dollars in a year. So Turkish economy is pretty good, but the sanctions actually hurt them, despite the fact that this pastor, was allegedly involved in the overthrow and the smuggling of weapons and so on and so forth. The releasing of this pastor is timely based on what happened in the Turkish, the consulate in Turkey for Saudi Arabia. So we see a lot of changing of hands of human capital as well as political sanctions and so on and so forth. Anybody else want to have that?
Yeah. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I'll go after you.
All right, no doubt. Yeah, so I find this pretty interesting that Turkey released a pastor right around this time. I guess it's kind of a little, stab at Saudi Arabia because they don't like each other at all. I mean, this goes way back to the Ottoman Empire. I think the Wahhabist movement had like 3 uprisings against the Ottoman Empire, and the Ottoman Empire crushed all 3 of them. So it's like a little hatred that goes way back. And regarding with the Turkish economy, I mean, is this a result of them trying to get away from the dollar, like de-dollarization? I understand that a lot of these, developing economies like Iran and Turkey, and then you look at Venezuela, you look at Brazil, Argentina, so many of these developed economies, some countries in Asia, like their currencies are like collapsing right now. Is this a result of like the dollar gaining strength, that's what hurt them, or is it just them, you know, the pains of de-dollarization? Like it's hurt.
The dollar has always been strong against the Turkish lira, so that's not really so much as the problem. But being dependent upon the dollar really hurts them because their import and export of goods and operations is actually very centered around that. So the idea of getting away from it actually may be beneficial to them because they don't really do much business with the United States anyways. Uh, um, Trade speaking, right, in relevance to what they do with the Far East, what they do with China, what they do with Russia, and what they do with the European Union. And their accession to the European Union, um, they could actually trade their lira against the euro and actually come out better, or they could trade their lira against the yuan and actually come out better. Um, so getting away from the U.S. dollar might actually be beneficial for them.
Right. Yeah, I also thought this was very interesting that they would release this pastor. I thought they were just going to keep him, you know, despite the sanctions. But it looks like I guess they caved a little bit to the pressure. But this guy is definitely some kind of CIA plant, you know, under the cover of being a pastor, you know, starting up trouble over there.
Right. Right. He was definitely a agent of the agency. However, it would seem to me that Turkey would use him as a bargaining chip, much like Russia has Snowden as a bargaining chip, right? He would actually be an formidable bargaining chip going forward. Maybe they got all the information that they wanted out of him for the time being. They saw no reason to actually keep him long term. It doesn't make any sense. If they got all the information they could out of him.
And
Yeah,
oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Jack.
no, I'm just gonna say that was my thoughts too. I thought this from reading the article, it sounded to me he was an agent as well, because it just the whole just everything like his background just didn't make any sense for him to be over there, you know. So
Right.
that was my thoughts.
Right. He has a church with like 25 people in it. I mean, why does a Christian pastor need to be inside a majority Muslim country?
And the United States, they love using pastors. I mean, my family's from Haiti, and most of the destabilization that the United States has done is through pastors. These pastors come in, they, you know, support, you know, different political parties or give them arms to start trouble, and they can say, well, these damn Haitians can't get it together, so we're going to intervene. And I mean that's what happened in 2004, basically, when they got rid of Aristide. They pastors came in, supplied these guys, these former ex-military guys with weapons, trained them, and then start trouble, and then say, oh, well, we got to get in there. And I think with Turkey, it was supporting the failed coup, and I guess it failed spectacularly. So the Turks got him. They arrested him, and I guess, like you said, they probably got information from him, all the information that they needed. But I guess they gave him back to the United States as sort of they were like, all right, you know, this whole thing that's going on with Saudi Arabia, you know, we give this guy back. You know, you can give us some benefits to try to, you know, get rid of these sanctions, you know, because our economy's kind of fucked up. You know, I guess that sort of thing. But yeah, the U.S. has always used pastors. I know for a fact in Haiti they use them a lot. Latin America, they use pastors, priests all the time, and Europeans have been doing this since forever. That's how they colonize West Africa. Like
Right.
they bring these pastors, they come in. Some of these priests were like prisoners in Europe. They made them priests like as nothing. These priests would go to Africa, spread Christianity, quote unquote, and then they would have like 4 or 5, you know, African women to do their will, whatever, you know, as sex slaves basically. So Europeans have always used religion as a way to spread chaos. That's their MO.
Right, and particularly using. What was that, Mike?
I said it's interesting. We have two Haitians on the panel. We have Jack and we have Zoe. So Sapase to both of you all.
Nabule.
Yeah, Mambule, my friend. Go ahead, Antigravity.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, under modern international guidelines for warfare, no one is supposed to be using people of religion in any kind of intelligence gathering or warfare, but the U.S. flaunts that at every turn. So I just wanted to make note of that.
So, going forward, right? How do you think this is going to affect American and U.S. and Turkey's relationship?
Well,
economically
the relationship that they have, the relationship that they have is not very solid, right? Because they allegedly the United States was behind the coup during the Obama administration to take out Erdogan, and because Erdogan was actually was not going to play well with this whole Syria conspiracy. So when Russia, when the Russian jet was shot down over Syria by Turkish fighter jet, the possibility of a retaliation from Russia would drag other NATO partners into a conflict that they weren't ready for. And you saw during the time just before that Turkish jet was shot down, they started pulling out the missile batteries, the Patriot missile batteries, and all that stuff was actually taken out. And up to recently, the nuclear warheads were actually taken out of Turkey. So now Turkey is basically naked. And if they're taking out the nuclear weapons, then you already know that the relationship is already soured. I think Turkey is going to go their own way, go their own separate ways in terms of military cooperation and I think political cooperation. They don't really need the United States since they have they have Russia and they have the European Union to back them up.
Yeah, they're still part of NATO though. They haven't. Really much. Well, in terms of if they're ever attacked, they have at least Article 5.
Actually, that's why they pulled out of. That's why the United States and Germany and who's the third partner? Greece actually pulled out. They're not going to help. They're not going to help Turkey out. That's why Turkey wants to go buy the S-400. If you're going to take the Patriot missile battery out of my country, then I need some other form of aerial defense, and just the S-400 is conveniently ready. So if they're going to make a partnership with Russia to buy the surface air missile battery, they that means that the relationship is over.
Okay, damn, I didn't know about that, because if they're not living up to Article 5, then there's really nothing to be gained from the relationship, and they're not going to be allowed into the EU because they haven't I guess apologized for the Kurdish or not the Kurdish, the Armenian genocide, so they're not going to be part of EU anytime soon.
But actually, that may come to an end. Actually, that may come to an end in the next few months. You may see something come out of that. Turkey has no reason to hold that over them. It's a good political play. It allows Turkey to expand. It allows Russia to get out of Armenia and refocus their efforts on Syria. And it also allows the Blue Stream pipeline, the South Stream pipeline, to actually get logistically access through that corridor. So you may see a whole lot of things come out of Turkey, Armenia, and even Syria as well.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah.
And another thing too. So sorry.
Go ahead, bro.
All right, no doubt. Like if Turkey leaves NATO, that would be a devastating blow. I mean, admitting Turkey to NATO was one of the major pieces that helped the U.S. win the Cold War. Because what does Turkey control? The Bosphorus Strait and the Dardanelles. Like Russia, the one thing that Europe has feared is if Russia gets a warm water port, and they've always used like the Ottoman Empire and Turkey as a way to block off Russia. If Turkey leaves NATO and aligns itself with Russia, that would be a massive failure. Like, and not to mention, Turkey has the second largest military in NATO. So if Turkey leaves NATO, that's going to be a devastating blow for the U.S. to counter Russia, and it will be a major success for Russia. I think that's why Russia is pushing so hard to get to get close to Turkey, because they know that'll be another checkmate. That'll be devastating for the West, because now something that they've been trying to prevent Russia from having for like 300 years has come true, and they lost Turkey, which is a pretty sizable country and has a pretty powerful military. So I guess trying to get rid of Erdogan was a major mistake.
Right. And to keep in mind as well that there's been discussion going back and forth between Turkey and Russia about Turkey opening up a possible port, naval port for Russia, as well as a landing strip for Russia as well for their fighter jets. So if push comes to shove, that could be worst case scenario, that Turkey allows Russia to utilize a naval port and an airstrip, and in return, Turkey gets to use the majority of the of Russia's area of the Black Sea, for air access and as well as naval access. But Iran and Turkey Iran is also included in this deal. So Iran has been back and forth with Turkey for the last 6 months or so, which is something that hasn't happened in the past. Typically, Turkey and Iran are always at odds with each other because of different factions of Islam. So we'll see what happens, what comes out of all this, because even now, I saw a few days ago that Russia and Iran are coming to terms on utilizing a part of Iran for air power. Basically having a landing strip available for them. Go ahead, Jack.
What I was going to ask is, do you think this has anything to do with them being pretty much at the tail end with everything going on in Syria, right? Or with just flushing out the that regime out there? So you think this has anything to do with that, seeing that they're almost at the tail end of winning that war, as far as clearing out the last enclave of extremists there?
Yeah, the war's basically over.
Okay.
Right. The only extremists that they consider is the PYK or the PKK, and what they want to do is ethnically cleanse these people out of Syria. And to be quite honest with you, that's an international crime. Like, you're going around killing people based on their ethnicity, not based on any crimes that they committed in somebody else's country.
Well, they're charging them for treason. At least that's what at least that's what Bashar al-Assad is saying. That when the war broke out, you didn't back me, but you backed the opposition. That's his argument. Not saying it's right, but that's what he's saying.
As of the article I read this morning is that Assad is actually forgiving these traitors. So he's allowing them to put their guns down and actually come in and turn themselves in.
Is that
However,
recent?
for Turkey to come in, yeah, that was this morning. So
okay, damn.
for Turkey to come into somebody else's country and ethnically cleanse other people out based on the idea that they're terrorists without actually arresting people and using the proper channels, that's to me in itself is an international crime. So now, if I'm the PKK, I have no other choice but to get support from a third party resource like the United States and defend myself.
Wait, earlier were you talking about Syria or were you talking about Turkey? Maybe I didn't understand.
No.
Turkey is coming into Syria to ethnically cleanse. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, to cleanse out the Kurds.
Oh, okay. I thought you were speaking about Syria. Okay.
No, right. Syria should defend the Kurds because they're citizens, and it's within the constitution to do so. However, for whatever reason, Turkey feels adamant about ethnically cleansing a bunch of people, just based on the idea that they're potential terrorists. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, and when you look at it, I mean, the Turks always feared a second a second Kurdistan at their border. Like that's one of their main fears, and that's why they're like using these former extremists that fought against Bashar al-Assad and training them to fight the Kurds, because basically the war is over. Like the rebels have been effectively been beaten. Like I mean, militarily, they've been beaten on the ground. Like they only have Idlib. So Turkey's like, you know what? This war's been going on for so long. We've been supporting these rebels. They can't even win a battle. These niggas can't fight. So they're like, you know what? We'll stop supporting them. We'll use them against the Kurds. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So, I mean, the Kurds are going to the U.S. for support, but can you really trust the U.S.? Because the U.S. will support you today, and then they'll leave you tomorrow. Like that's basically U.S. foreign policy. So the Kurds are in a rock and a hard place. So
ask the Hmong about that. I guess
yeah,
would be the best. Yeah.
So either they link up with Assad and just figure out a deal, or try to deal with Turkey, but then having a third party that's kind of flaky, very flaky.
All right, we'll move on to our next article. So this next article is from NDTV. India signs deal for Russian S-400 missile system amid U.S. threats. So again, another country buys the S-400 missile system, and the United States doesn't like it, so the United States, threatens to put sanctions on India. Wash, rinse, repeat. What's happening now is that everybody is loading up their artillery for defensive capabilities in the event that there is a global conflict. We see Russia and China doing military drills in the Pacific. We see Japan wanting to sign deals with India to have joint naval operations. Having a naval port inside Japan for India, and India allowing Japan to have a naval port outside of India. Turkey buying the S-400. Algeria in Africa buying the S-400. Iran has the S-300 now. Syria has the S-300 now. Iraq is potentially looking to buy, I think, in the next couple of months, the S-400 missile system. The United States is pretty much, it's a no-fly zone, basically put up right now. And the United States doesn't like it. Even Saudi Arabia has put in their bid for the S-400 missile system. So, with all that being said, you guys jump in.
So why do you think United States have a big problem with just India buying S-400s? Like, what's the big problem? How did India affect?
The idea is to isolate Russia so that no one could do business with them, and you can collapse their country, collapse their political structure. If their economic structure is spiraling out of control, then their political structure will spiral out of control as well. At least that's what's supposed to happen. However, even though Russia has been isolated and kicked off the SWIFT system, countries are still doing business with them. Vietnam is now talking about buying the S-400 missile system. So China has bought it. And the United States put sanctions on them as well. So how long can the United States keep putting sanctions on people? Because sanctions are a prelude to war. And putting sanctions on anybody is like saying, it's like balling up your fist to a person that already is trying to shake your hand. But Joe,
Exactly. And all this sanctioning of sanctioning China, the sanction threatening to sanction, India or sanction any countries that do business with Russia. All this is going to do is accelerate de-dollarization because these people can be like, yo, this power is just bugging. Like this United States is trying to use this dollar to basically trying to hurt us, trying to use this economic power to make us weaker. We have to get off the dollar because this global superpower is really acting up. It's kind of reminds me of uh, uh, like Rome on its last days, trying to exert as much influence as it can, but it's only accelerating its decline. I think I read somewhere that before empires collapse, they usually try to exert power to show that they still got it, kind of like a 40-year-old quarterback who has a beer belly, trying to show that he still got it, but then he probably does. He tries to run, but he tears his ACL and ends his career. So that's basically what the U.S. is doing, just accelerating its decline. And I don't even know why they have a problem with India. The U.S. never really had much ties with India, even during the Cold War, because they supported Pakistan. So all they're doing is just pissing more nations off. They're like, yo, we have to get off the dollar because we can't be living like this no more, and it's going to hurt them in the long run. It's ironic they're trying to hurt Russia's economy, but they're going to hurt theirs in the long run.
Yeah, I agree because I think they're just losing their power, man. Their world power, their ability to control their nations, right? They're losing that, and it's happening right before everyone's eyes, right? So I think, again, as I said before, like I think the United States is pretty much a sinking ship, and it's a good example of it is when Donald Trump went to the UN, right? And he just began his speech, and he was just um, explaining to the people that all the great things my administration has done, and they laughed at him, which was the first time I've ever seen that happen. And it's just I think things are just falling apart, and the mere fact they're just sanctioning. They want to sanction India just for buying weapons. They can't sanction everybody who buy these weapons. It doesn't make any sense. So I think, yeah, it's just them. They're gonna shoot themselves in the foot, and it's not gonna end good for U.S. at the end of everything.
anti-gravity, you have anything? It's probably eating Chinese food.
Yeah. So, and also to go on top of that, it's like, like I said before, India never really had much ties with the United States anyway. Like Russia and India have like close relations going back since India's foundation. So trying to sanction these countries and it's not working. It's not working because these countries on activity, they're like, oh, we can handle sanctions. We got this. And well, like you said, we're seeing like the decline of American power. It's like, uh, and this is what the Russians and the Chinese keep saying. They say like the whole world knows the U.S. is declining, but Washington does it. Like, if you go to the Pentagon, you go to the State Department, you go to Congress, or the White House, they think it's like 1990, it's like 1994, where the U.S. was like the only power that there was. But nah, man, the times have changed. Two wars in the Middle East basically show that you're not as powerful as you think you are, and all these stupid decisions that you're doing across the world is hurting you. And the thing is, what Trump symbolizes is like the last gasp, the last gasp of American might and power. But all it's going to do is basically lead to its downfall. And in regards to with Iran, that's why I think even when Trump got elected, the first thing that came to my thoughts like he's going to go to war with Iran. It's going to happen. He's going to go to war with Iran, and if that happens, that's basically it for the United States. That's going to shatter America's powerful image because the only thing they have left is basically their Navy and Air Force. And even that, is looking funny in the light. So I think what the United States is doing, what other empires have done in the past, when they're about to decline, they want to show they still got it, but then they decline even faster. Kind of like a 40-year-old football player who tears his ACL, who thinks he still got it. So.
Mm-hmm. Jack, everything?
Yeah, I was gonna say, has U.S. tried selling weapons to India? Like,
The deal that they offered India was that they would share their military technology and logistics with India. However, that doesn't really do much for India. I mean, India doesn't need to know about Patriot missile battery. What the hell do they need that for? It really doesn't really open up a whole lot of opportunity for India. It's more of a benefit for the United States to share India's naval port with them in opposition to China, right? But India can manage their own battles. India is not no slouch of a military power. They're actually in the top 20 of military powers. So they don't really need the United States as a long-term partner. It would be nice to have the United States as a long-term partner if they're going to share the F-35 and all these other newly advanced technologies. But yeah, the only thing that could really hurt India right now, what Trump can do, is just cut off H-1B visas from India and just call it a day and just say, take your people and get the hell out of my country.
but won't that hurt? Won't that hurt U.S. too at the end of the day? Because they're already outsourcing, it won't really affect them.
Not necessarily. They can always outsource to Philippines. Philippines is pretty strong in IT. They can always outsource to European NATO countries. They don't typically need India.
Mm. So what do you foresee America being the next 25 years, man, next 30 years? Because where things are now, seeing that we have the orange man in the house right now, and he's setting a path for U.S. What do you see in the next 20 years to 30 years that America's place would be as far as power-wise? Where would they be?
Well, America is like Drew Bledsoe. He's on his last leg. He could throw a couple of he can throw a couple of passes, but not a touchdown. And I think the problem with Trump, and a lot of people are enamored by Trump being inside the house, don't realize that Trump was brought in for that very reason, which was to restore and help, or at least help soften the blow of an impact that's about to happen. It's not like, oh, Trump can solve the whole entire thing, and it's not even Trump's fault, nor can he solve it.
Yeah.
His job is to actually find a soft place to land while they come down from power.
Yeah, so I'd like to touch upon that, where the U.S. will be the next 25 years. I mean, I think the biggest elephant in the room that no one in the U.S. wants to touch upon is the national debt, which is basically I would say it's kind of like high cholesterol in a man who's 50 years old. You see signs it's going to be something bad is going to happen, and he's still eating cheeseburgers. But because I think the CBO they forecast that by 2028, interest of the debt is going to be higher than the U.S. defense budget. I mean, when that happens, that's not sustainable. That's not sustainable. So I think where the U.S. is going to be is the 2020s is going to be a very interesting decade, because it's going to put the U.S. in the crossroads. They're going to have to make deep cuts here, and I don't know that there's no political will to raise taxes, because the Republicans are against that, and some Democrats too. I think they're going to make cuts in social programs, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. So I think by the end of the next decade, the U.S. will be in the middle of the next decade, by 2025, as BGS kind of say, watch out for 2025. The U.S. will be in a debt and currency crisis, and I don't want to know what's that going to look like, to be honest, because it's when you're in a debt and fiscal crisis, as we saw in Europe, at least those countries have people who could bail them out. The U.S. is in trouble, they're going to have to make significant cuts, and it's not going to be good because for U.S. society, it's going to be really, really, really bad. I don't see a total collapse, but I could see like maybe what Russia went through in the early 1990s, kind of like that, like right after the Soviet Union collapsed, a very deep economic crisis. And unfortunately, the U.S. is not like an authoritarian country like Russia, where they would accept one man who could save them. It's very liberal, and when things fall apart, it could get ugly. So, I mean, it's not looking good.
Gravity, do you think that if things were like inflation will rise once, because all these nations are going to eventually jump off the dollar, man, because they're going to have to, because this can't, it's not stable. And then seeing international relationships, right? They're trying to get off the dollar. So once they do, well, if a high amount of inflation to happen to the amount like kind of like what was going on in Venezuela, or it's not that extreme. Or your thoughts on it, Mike?
Well, I guess I'll answer that. Would the U.S. be like Venezuela? I certainly hope not. I mean, if you look at Caracas, their murder rate is like it's significantly high. I think they have like 3,000 murders this past year. I mean, I live in New York City. That'd be like if there was 8,000 murders in one year in New York City. That would be just like devastating. I think it would be more like what happened in Russia, like in the early 90s, like a deep, probably like a depression type of economy, a deep currency crisis. And I don't know what's going to come out at the end of that. I mean, I could forecast that what's going to happen, but what comes out of that, well, it depends. Like, the U.S., one thing I'll say, if you look at U.S. history, they've been lucky. Like, they've been real, like a lot of luck went their way. So maybe a bad luck will hit them, and if it really hits them, it probably will knock them out that they can't recover. So,
Got you. That's what I'm trying to figure out, because I know I think everything's going with Iran as far as the sanctions. They were talking about implementing the SWIFT, so I guess they're gonna work around the sanctions. Do you think that's what? Let's say there were sanctions other nations, they can just try to work their way around it as far as everything with the cryptocurrency and just backing their currencies with resources.
I mean, you're already seeing that.
What was that?
I know I said that you're already seeing that.
I was going to say that as long as the United States has a strong currency and has the control of the banking system in Wall Street and London and Brussels, it won't make sense. They're not going to fall completely out of control, and you won't see so much as hyperinflation. What you will see is a waning of currencies. Of currencies being dependent upon the dollar and being more dependent upon the euro, be more dependent upon the yuan, be more dependent upon the yen. If all comes out, if everything else fails, right, and also the rupee. The rupee could actually surge and come back because India is still a powerhouse in terms of service management, and they're a member of the SCO, as well as a member of the BRICS. So your BRICS countries will actually rebalance themselves, and the United States will just slowly decline, but they won't be completely out of the game. They'll still be a second string quarterback at this point.
You think? Well, that's what we said for economics. We'll talk about that economics. I'll talk about as far as the Fed increasing the rates, but we'll say that for Friday night.
Yes. We'll get to the next article. So next article is from the BBC. Why is it so hard for Africans to visit other African countries? This has been a discussion for quite some time because a lot of people were saying, it's hard to, even from the United States, it's hard to travel from the United States to Africa in a free fashion. You have to get all types of papers and shots and everything else set up. But what's happening in other African countries is that they're pretty much tribalized. So they don't allow other Africans to just freely come in and out of their countries. Nigerians are having a lot of problems in South Africa. I think last year or the last couple of years, where they've been having their shops burned down by South Africans on the ground. You have your francophone countries that are in limbo with each other, even though they're a part of the whole francophone network. They typically don't allow other people to go in and out. You see the problems in Cameroon with English-speaking Cameroonians and French-speaking Cameroonians having problems. So there's a whole lot of issues, just socially speaking, that also contributes to the problem. Now, the main problem is that you don't have an AU passport set up, and that's something that they're working on right now. Imagine in the United States, you can't go from Massachusetts to New York because your Massachusetts ID or your New York ID isn't accepted in either one of those states, and that you have to use a passport or some other identity means. That would be unacceptable.
Yeah, as I was saying, what's the solution? What's the solution to unifying all these countries? I know they have the AU, but it's like they got to do something better than this, man. I think it was the billionaire. I forgot his name. But the Nigerian billionaire, he said he has like 28 passports, and he has a tough time going in and out of different countries. And I'm just like, but it also explained that other people from other countries can go right to other countries and travel around and not have a problem. So I'm like, why would it be a big problem for Africans already there, opposed to Europeans or those from Western countries who go into there and go any country they want? So, why? I'm trying to figure out, man, why is such an issue with other Africans amongst that continent, opposed to Europeans can go in and out any country they want? Like, why? They shouldn't they reverse that? Kind of think about that.
Well, but, you have to remember that a lot of African countries are still coming out of colonialism. So a lot of especially civil wars too. The last civil war in Africa is still going on right now between South Sudan. So there's a lot of conflict still going on that still hasn't been ironed out, even after the colonialists have been removed out of power, so to speak. So unless the African Union can come up with a blockchain solution to actually put everybody. See, the problem is that a lot of people are from different tribes and whatnot, and a lot of countries are really xenophobic, so to speak. It's hard to imagine that's happening in Africa, but that still happens in Africa, where certain tribes don't want certain other tribes from coming into their towns and states and things of that nature. That actually could be solved with the blockchain by putting all these people onto one AU blockchain, all their identities, all their their DNA and stuff like that, and whether or not they have HIV or what kind of sicknesses or illnesses that they have, and you can resolve a whole lot of issues that way. That's just me speaking from a technology perspective. Now, politically speaking, that's something that they have to figure out within the
AU. And also to touch upon that, like Africa's tribalism is one of the biggest impediments, like that's holding the continent back. And I'm kind of optimistic in the sense that, I mean, they just got out of colonialism like not too long ago. So these nations are pretty much new. So I guess as they develop more, I guess as history has shown, like as countries develop, they as more people are educated, they begin to develop instead of having a intertribal nationalism, they have a national nationalism, if you know what I mean. And in regard to security, I think that's another big problem with Africa, is that they don't have no control over their domestic security, which is a big problem. Like the African Union peacekeepers are pretty much useless in that sense. I mean, there was some, I guess there's some like some good signs when Boko Haram was on that march to West Africa, and all the West African countries like Senegal, like Nigeria, Ghana, they all got together and they kind of halted Boko Haram. And I think if they can
That was
like somehow
ECOWAS.
control, yeah, yeah, that was a major success. That was when I read that, I was like real happy. So I think there has to be a way to have, I wouldn't say have like a AU army that would like try to, stop all the violence or provide security, but some form of um I mean, I think you guys talked about it on, was it on Friday or Saturday? Like, if there were like a black, private military contractors, like, if we had like some of those, like, black military veterans in the West could like join these private military contractors, go over there, train these countries' militaries, and make them stronger so they can have a strong security. Because security is it is one of the ways that can provide development. I mean, if you look at Europe, I mean, yeah, there was, the Yugoslavia civil war and some other conflicts that are going on, but for the most part, Europe is pretty stable. I think stability and tribalism has to go. I think tribalism will go away as these countries develop, as more people are educated, they move to cities, interact with other tribes. But security, I mean, there has to be some mechanism, like the African Union peacekeepers have to be more proactive, but like to combat extremism, because that's the main problem. And to combat extremism, you have to combat poverty. So it's like it comes back full circle. So it's very complex.
Well, I wish anti-gravity was around. I mean, he's an African himself, so be able to speak more to that. Anti-gravity, if you're there, can you speak to that? I guess not. Um, so looking at this chart right here, do Africans need visas? And it says that South Africa visa is required, Nigeria visa is required, on a percentile basis. I'm going by Ghana. A visa is required. It's more required on arrival than it is initially. So, but for the most part, Kenya seems to be the most friendly, and Mauritanian is actually pretty friendly too. Um, yeah, I don't see, I you know,
I don't get with
Africa is
South
not in
Africa. Like,
comparison. Excuse me.
yeah, with South Africa, I don't get. Like, I remember a couple years ago, I think it was like neighboring immigrants were in South Africa, and then these South Africans like burned down their businesses and whatnot. I was like, what the hell? Like, you would burn down your fellow Africans' business, but then you let these fucking Afrikaners, you know, basically go scot free, basically control all the land and all the diamonds and resources in Africa. It's just, I don't know. Tribalism is a bitch.
Yeah, yeah. There has to be a more sustainable solution. But I assume that, according to this article, that a lot of stuff is being ironed out right now as we speak. But it's still a point of contention that where Africans who can't even visit other African countries will be like Americans who can't visit other American states. I mean, imagine not being able to go to New York. Like, who can't go to New York? Like, what the hell is that? To us that doesn't compute.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Europe has something similar to that too. I think if you have like a passport and like I think if you're in France, you can go to Germany like little issue, like if you drive there or something. I think Europe has
It,
something similar.
it's all borderless. That's basically the European Union's policy, is to be borderless. They even have an EU pass that you can use when you travel there, and get from country to country in one day. Um, why Africa still hasn't caught up with that, I don't know. There's a lot of things that the African Union does good, but then there's other areas where you're like, I don't know about that. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And it kind of not having the ability to intertravel within the continent actually hurts their development process. And plus, other countries within the AU actually have tariffs on each other. Similar to how the United States has tariffs on China. They also have tariffs on each other. So there's a whole lot of things that need to be ironed out, and I think technology can actually improve a lot of that stuff. RFIDs, blockchain, cryptocurrencies,
I think
fintech.
blockchain. Well, your blockchain idea would work wonders. I think that would help. That would help
Right.
significantly.
On a side note, man, for as far as the African Union, what Gaddafi was gonna do, or coach kind of like ahead of that, who do you think is who's the upcoming leader is gonna go ahead and lead all this? Because somebody needs to bring unite all these African countries together, man. They got to do it, bro. Like
that's Paul
hasn't
Kagame,
happened. Who?
the leader of Rwanda, Paul Kagame. He's
Okay.
he's probably the next he's the next Gaddafi. So, but Gaddafi's son is still alive. Keep that in mind. He's actually running for president. So
Really?
we'll see what happens. Yeah, he just got out of jail about maybe a year or so ago. He got out of jail, so he's all cleaned up now. He has a PhD in economics. He was the one really driving the golden dinar. It was him. He has a PhD in economics from the London School of Finance, so he's no dummy.
Interesting.
I think it's a major point to understand that, as you mentioned before, that it's also like Africa's security. I think that's the reason why Africa's not borderless, because there's still like so many armed groups roaming around. And I think it's important that these African countries develop like a strong security security apparatus, because I think that's Africa's weak underbelly, that the West can just support armed groups, that they use like the Gulf states to support extremist groups like Al Shabaab, Boko Haram, and all these other groups to just basically destabilize them. If these African countries can, strengthen their militaries to handle these groups, and also take over areas that were originally out of government control, I think that would help. Because let's be real, like it's the West that's behind the destabilization of Africa. They're letting these armed groups roam around. Like look what they did with Libya. They took out Gaddafi. Libya descended to chaos, and that spread to Mali, and then Mali's chaos spread to the surrounding countries. So it's like, Gaddafi. If Gaddafi had a stronger military to hold on stronger, I guess that would, prevent all the chaos that's going on around that region, and also, other African countries have stronger militaries could stop these armed groups roaming around. Because I think that's a major problem. There's so much ungovernable space in Africa. It's ridiculous. They have to be governable space.
Yeah, 2/3 of Africa hasn't actually been developed at all. When you really put it into question, I mean, I understand what you're saying about Gaddafi, but it really wasn't the United States. It had more to do with, one, the Europeans being afraid of European capitalism in Africa coming to an end if the golden dinar was to take place. And number two, the Arabs did not like Gaddafi at all. Gaddafi kind of got on his bully pulpit and cussed him out at the OIC, and basically said that what happened to Saddam Hussein in 2003 can happen to any one of you guys, and he's right. We're seeing this happen with Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, in Saudi Arabia. High potential that he could be taken out, and we saw what happened to Gaddafi after he said that. They took him out, and he shook hands with Obama in the White House. You imagine how much of a disrespect that was in 2009 when he went to go meet him. He said, we now have somebody in the White House who's our friend, who's a child of Africa. How can we not go wrong with this? And saw what Obama did to not just Africa, but what he did to black people in America. Just kind of turned his back on everybody and supported white liberalism.
So let's say he was able to do that, man. Let's say he was able to create that currency, right, and do that, right? Get it backed up. So how would that affect the financial markets throughout the world? Like what would have happened?
That would make resources like cobalt in Africa extremely expensive. Lithium extremely expensive, because it's all dependent. It's all tied back to the value of that dinar, and that dinar is made of gold, and you have to pay the price of gold. Gold is right now is sitting at $11.99, I think, or $1,200. If you have to pay that much money for a piece of raw material, that could send smartphones, tablets, $2,000, $3,000. Laptops being $5,000.
Damn.
Because the battery technology is just so expensive to make, because your resources are tied up inside this golden dinar. That could put Africa at the brink of war, because everybody will be trying to take Africa now.
That's deep.
Yep, that's very true. And that was like Gaddafi's dream, to have that gold dinar. And if that were to happen, I guess the Chinese wouldn't be too pleased, and the Russians wouldn't be too pleased. Everyone else wouldn't be too pleased, because Africa's on its own. So I guess they had to stop it before it even had a chance to be implemented. But I think it's because I kind of agree with BGS says, like, the Africans have to kind of accept what the Chinese are offering. The Chinese are offering you technology, they're offering you infrastructure. So I guess for the meantime, they have to take that offer, develop, the infrastructure, develop their economies, develop their technologies. And if things go according to plan, I think by 2050, Africa will be in a much, much, much better place, because it's a young continent. They get rid of infant mortality, and they have a longer lifespan. I think the continent would have like 4 to 5 billion people, and a strong economy, has a lot of resources. Yeah, Africa would be unstoppable. Would be unstoppable. And ultimately, what I would hope is, when that day comes, they would starve off Europe from these resources, because Europe is going down the tube. So kind of starve them out of resources and focus east.
Right. It was actually the French that were actually very worried about what Gaddafi's plans were, because France has these francophone countries inside, or francophone states inside Africa, that would actually be affected by this whole golden dinar and everything else that's going to be encompassed in with it. And also keep in mind that Gaddafi at one point had the strongest military. He had nuclear weapons as well, and he gave those up. Giving up those nuclear weapons is what helped him meet his fate, so to speak. Had he had those nuclear weapons, they wouldn't have attacked at all. I mean, he's gone toe to toe with the United States before. During Reagan's administration, he went to battle with those F-14 Tomcats out in the Mediterranean. So he's not afraid to bite back if he has to. He was the last strong man in Africa, last Pan-Africanist.
So let's say that had happened, right? What do you think that would have meant? What do you think would have happened for Haiti? Because I know Haiti's somewhat part of the African Union, right? So what do you think that could have done for Haiti if that had happened?
Gaddafi's goal was to bring Haiti into the African Union. In matter of fact, his other goal was to bring in Latin America into the African Union. He wanted to create something called SATO, which is the South Atlantic Treaty Organization, as a response to NATO. You imagine there's 55 countries in Africa, and then there's 24 countries inside Latin America. You take all those countries and put them together, that would be a headache, not just for the United States, but for the European Union. They can't do anything against that.
So he was a true visionary.
Absolutely. Yeah, from the interviews that I see with his son, he was highly intelligent. How he got to be so intelligent, I don't know, but he was highly intelligent. He's the pragmatist.
Yeah, he was basically the last Pan-Africanist. Like he really wanted Africa to get on its feet, and it's kind of ironic. Like I think because most Libyans are Arab, right? So he didn't really hold any like racist views, like most of those North Africans kind of hold, like Egypt and Algeria and Morocco, and they kind of look down upon, the melanated people of Africa. He didn't hold those views, but if he incorporated Haiti, that would have significantly helped Haiti because, to be honest, the U.S. has been holding back Haiti's progress since 1804. Like,
right. And keep in mind that he was the first and only Arab leader to actually apologize for the African slave trade. He did that when he
Hmm.
first came into power.
I didn't know that.
So that was, yeah, that also put a bullseye on his back because a lot of African leaders did not like that, right? So and by their, especially Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is one of the biggest, traders of African humans bodies. So they didn't like him saying that, and they didn't like how progressive he was in Islam because he allowed women to have leadership roles. And the problem with other Arab countries, they're not particularly friendly to progressiveness of the West, right? So Gaddafi was good in that area that he can say, yeah, we have women in our staff, we have women in leadership positions, women actually, his female bodyguards. He didn't have male bodyguards; he had female bodyguards. He was very left wing, very liberal in that approach. But at the same time, um, a lot of your other Arab states in the OIC did not like that. They didn't like the whole idea of apologizing to black people in Africa for African slave trade. He was very good with the Nation of Islam. He gave Nation of Islam like $1 billion or something like that, or a $500 million. I forget how much money he was giving them.
Hmm.
Um, he also funded the IRA. He also funded the Irish uprising inside Ireland against the British.
Really?
So
That's
he was no joke.
crazy.
Gaddafi was spending money. He was no joke.
yeah, I think I read a story. I think so. I think it was the GDs or the BDs in Chicago. I think he had contact with Larry Hoover. Like he was gonna send like weapons over to the gangs or something. Like he was gonna give them like AKs and all types of weapons to start an uprising in Chicago. And this was in the '80s. Like this is not something from the '60s or '70s. This was like in the '80s, like in the peak of Reaganism. Like he really was about
He
to like
supported
start some shit.
Yeah, he supported Palestinians as well. He was very good with Arafat. Arafat was good with the Black Panther Party. North Koreans. He would support North Koreans. He was supporting the end of the Vietnam War. He was a big part of that as well. He was no joke.
So he was really so pretty much in the global stage. He was well respected, and
Yeah, him
so
and Castro were
Well,
like
feared.
buddies. Him and
mm.
Castro were buddies.
So once he was taken out, what like, I don't remember like what was the global stance on that when that happened to him? What were they saying?
Which
Like
go?
what's
What,
going on
what
in
do you mean global
Syria?
stance?
Like what were people around the world saying? Like different leaders, different nation leaders were saying about that when they saw that happen.
Well,
What were the sentiments?
well, the only ones that really matter are North Korea. North Korea is looking at this and saying Gaddafi gave up his nuclear weapons and you bombed him. We have nuclear weapons and you want us to give up ours? I don't think so.
That's why they hold on
Iran,
to him so much.
right? Iran is saying we have to speed up our process because what happened to him can happen to us.
Mm,
And the
that's
thing with
deep.
Iran, I like to add, like the reason why Obama made that deal with Iran was that Iran was developing their nuclear weapons at such a fast pace that either the U.S. had two options: either go to war with Iran or accept Iran as a nuclear power. Now, Obama knew, even the Pentagon's like, we don't want to go to war with Iran because it would be devastating. Because Iran has leverage. They can say, all right, you bomb us. All right, we're gonna cut off the Straits of Hormuz. We're gonna, bomb Saudi Arabia's, water and infrastructure, collapse that society, bomb their oil infrastructure. So even if you reopen the ports of Hormuz, oil will still be at $400 a barrel for months, and we'll activate our proxies and spread chaos across the regions that you stretch yourself thin. The United States was like, all right, we'll make a deal with you. So, but when they saw what happened to Gaddafi, they were like, damn, like we should speed up our nuclear process because you have to remember when that happened, Iran accelerated their nuclear program, and then Obama was like, "Oh shit, I have to make a deal with Iran. If not, I might be forced to go to a devastating war. So, so everyone learned their lesson from Gaddafi. Like, don't give up your nukes because you get a knife in your butt. Basically, that's what happened.
Not just don't give up your nukes, but don't come to the White House. Everybody who has come to the White House has been taken out.
Yep. Yep. Very true.
So,
Very true.
so I guess nuclear weapons do give you more leverage then. So
It's a bargaining chip.
So is that? So you think that's why with Cuba, right? I think it was in decades ago, right, when they were getting what was going on with Cuba and the Cuban Missile Crisis? Like, wasn't Russia giving them nuclear weapons or something like that?
Russia was responding to what the United States was doing in Turkey. United States put nuclear weapons inside Turkey. The Russians found out and said, we're going to put nuclear weapons inside Cuba. And, Castro was all for it, right? He was all for it. And it was a good strategy, but it also sent goosebumps up the backside of the United States, saying, if you've got a missile that close to us, we can't have that. And they were going to go into Cuba and actually take them out. But the thing is, you go out and take out those missiles inside Cuba, what do you think is going to happen inside Turkey? And now you're talking about World War III. That was the last time the United States ever came to a huge global conflict. Now you're talking about Syria, and you're talking about bombing, the S-300 missile system inside Syria. You take out those S-300 missile systems that they put in Syria, it's game over. They'll go to war over that. The problem with Gaddafi didn't have any international support. All he had was the people inside Libya, and that was about it. Part of our problem, part of Gaddafi's downfall was our problem as well, because we didn't advocate for Gaddafi in the United States. We should have been boots on the ground, protesting and having like an organized political body like how AIPAC works for Israel. We should have had something like that for Africa and for Libya, and more importantly, we didn't do any of that. I think the Nation of Islam was probably the only one who were really organized to actually speak on behalf of Gaddafi and actually go to Libya several times and have good rapport. Even Gaddafi put the Tuaregs in place, gave them a place to live inside in Libya as a way to diversify Libya from an ethnicity standpoint. And what happened to the Tuaregs could have easily happened to black people coming from America going to Africa, where they got ethnically cleansed by these psychopaths with AK-47s. 50,000 Tuaregs were killed when Gaddafi was taken out. So 50,000 people is nothing to sneeze at. That's a lot of people you have to take out. That was their own Holocaust.
So since that happened in Libya, how has that country been? It's been stabilized, or is it still unstable? Like, what's going on with the country right now? Because I haven't really done so much research on it.
No, it's broken up into three parts.
Benghazi, three governments. Yeah.
It's all broken apart. In the next 10 years, you could see probably about maybe 6 more countries come out of Africa because of destabilization.
Damn.
Yeah, there's this guy that the West supports. I think it's named General Haftar. Like, he's like one of Gaddafi's ex-military guys, but he doesn't share Gaddafi's image. He's very pro-Arab, like typical. Like, all the factions in Libya are not Pan-Africanists. Maybe with the exception of Gaddafi's son. It's like the country's very they're destabilized. Like, these Arabs are just fighting amongst each other. Like, they're fighting amongst each other for power. So it's really sad what's going on in Libya, but hopefully it's a lesson to be learned. And I like to say this, that the irony of it all is when they destabilized Libya, what happened? The refugee crisis in Europe. So what comes around goes around. You have to be careful what you do, because there's something called blowback. So.
and they didn't consider that pretty much, right? They just went in there and did what they did. They didn't think about the blowback from it. You think?
Yeah, that they didn't consider the blowback. They thought, oh, it's just going to be, we were just going to do regime change, get rid of Gaddafi, we'll put a puppet in there. And then when they saw that their puppet was too weak in Libya, the different militias that they supported started fighting amongst each other, like, okay. And then the refugees came, and that's why they're trying to like stabilize Libya. Like, that's why the Europeans are like, we got to stabilize Libya. That's why you have a lot of people saying that get rid of Gaddafi was a mistake. A lot of Europeans said that. I think Obama said that too. A lot of them saying like it was a terrible mistake that they did because it just destabilized everything, and now they don't even have control of Libya, so it spiraled out of control.
No. Libya produced the most amount of barrels of oil, 3 million barrels of oil a day. So that really hurt. It really hurt the Chinese because the Chinese had a contract with Gaddafi to get some of this oil, because China needs a source for oil, and they were getting cheap oil out of Gaddafi. So it destabilized the whole entire global market temporarily, and even hurt Africans' security because now you have a lot of human trafficking going on, taking these melanated people and just pushing them all through Europe, and they basically riding these rubber dinkies.
Yep.
And drowning in the water. I think something like 3,000 people drowned, trying to get across the Mediterranean. It's just not safe. So we'll take one day and actually do a hangout just on Gaddafi alone. I think one of our African hangouts we'll have.
Yeah, we definitely need to do that because I think
because I learned that I didn't learn that Gaddafi was but most of the stuff that you mentioned that you talked about with Gaddafi, a lot to be learned.
All right, let's go to the last article. This is our very last one. Why the U.S. is engineering political change in East Africa. This is from October 9th, 2018, from Al Jazeera. I thought this article was pretty good. Covered a lot of things that a lot of current events that's happened in the East Africa, with Eritrea being propped up now, and Djibouti being left behind. Djibouti has several military bases from different powers inside of it. That's basically like a military backyard for everybody else, and, who need access to the Red Sea and the Indian Ocean. And the United States has been basically trying to bully its way into these areas. Somalia is a part of that whole entire circle as well. It makes it very vulnerable. Africans need money, some form of external investment, and a lot of these warring factions are actually taking advantage of this and paying cheap money to put their military bases there and their drone bases there and whatnot. So
yeah, I heard like Turkey, even Turkey has like a military base in Djibouti. Like they have there in case like I mentioned before, if chaos, if Saudi Arabia were to collapse, they will like take over Mecca, Medina. It's like Djibouti's like a military base whore. It's like everyone's like in it.
They're paying cheap money for it, right? I mean, it's prime real estate. Even though Djibouti, people are still poor inside the country, the leadership is actually getting a lot of money out of these military bases being there.
So what do you think? What do you think the problem is going to be of them doing that? What do you think the problem is going to be?
Everyone wants to protect their interests of logistics inside the Red Sea. So everybody's going to try to establish a military base there if they can't get their aircraft carriers to pass through their pass through those straits. I don't think anything's going to happen to Africa, but you're going to see a lot of conflict come out of that waterway because mercantile ships passing through there being hijacked and pirated by Somali pirates has always been a thing. but everybody has their own self interest inside that area. So a lot of the conflict could actually spill over. The trafficking of guns into Africa. In order to have access to certain roadways and certain land that they may need to that warring factions may need to actually establish military bases and things of that nature. There's a lot of innocent bystanders that can come out of this that will be hurt by these stupid warring factions who want to play police. In my opinion, the African Union should actually have their own maritime security and take care of all that stuff. They should. Why should the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar? Why should they have military bases in Africa? There's no African military bases in any of these countries, especially the United States. The United States will never tolerate a Nigerian military base being inside Baltimore. Fuck out of here.
Yeah, exactly. That's why it's mind-boggling that the African Union has really dropped the ball when it comes to like continental security. Like I said, there should be their own maritime, like I guess, force to protect African territory essentially. But I think it all comes back to that Africa. That they need cash and it's significantly weak. I mean, there really isn't. They don't have really strong militaries to like fight back. But I guess we will see some form of conflict. I think what else you're going to see is also the rise of like Chinese. I think they're already there. Like Chinese private military contractor companies. I think you're going to see an increase of those. I think the Chinese would try to spread their footprint by sending more, I guess you would say, military contractors. I mean, they have an excess of 100 million men, so they can like hire these guys with guns that will go over there, which, in my opinion, would be devastating for the continent.
Not just Africa.
China already has a military. Right ahead, Noah.
Okay, I was just gonna say there are already a lot of private military contractors already. Eric Prince started his joint Chinese private mercenaries over there. I forget the name, but I think we did an article about that a few months back. They're just not enough police in the country. So even if it's not just for mercenaries, private contracting is a defense contracting is a very, very big money over there, especially if for embassies, for high net worth individuals, for companies. Everyone has their own private, military, if you want to say, in a sense, as well as the mercenaries.
And that's partly because the African Union has to come up with a proper security posture. When you think about the European Union, they have NATO. Africa doesn't have anything close to that. Everybody is basically out for self, and it's not really sufficient for land-based security as well as maritime security. You have a lot of piracy going on, where you have a lot of ships being hijacked coming out of the Delta, and up the Red Sea, and as well as the Indian Ocean. Anything in the Horn of Africa is basically vulnerable. You have these pirates that have new lethal weapons. Anti-tank guided missiles being aimed at warships. I mean, not warships, but cargo ships. You can hijack these tankers. I mean, these cargo ships pretty easily. And that's why you see Rolls-Royce and Intel working together to come up with autonomous cargo ships, so that they don't have to have any human bodies on there to kidnap for and hold for ransom. You don't have to pay a ransom anymore.
Yeah, I think that just like I said before, I think the biggest problem for Africa, they need to like get control of their own domestic security. There's a lot of ungovernable space in Africa. Too many armed groups roaming around. Of course, they have support from foreign countries. So a lot of these foreign countries have, European countries have interest in just destabilizing these countries. So there has to be some form of mechanism, I guess, having I mean, I know the Russian and Chinese wouldn't mind training these troops in Africa just to get control of their own domestic security. But like I said, it comes full circle because the cause of these instability is poverty. These people don't have like if you look at Boko Haram, like in Nigeria, a lot of these people are not educated. They don't have they have no money. They're in poverty, and this group offers you, you know, we'll give you a better life because the government doesn't give a fuck about you. Of course, they're gonna pick up arms and, you know, fight against the government. So there has to be a way to combat those two things. It's very difficult issues. I think as if they can get control of their own domestic security, I think that would be one major hurdle that would propel Africa forward. Too many armed groups now in the continent. Too many.
Well, too many armed groups because there's too many guns being trafficked around. So the objective wouldn't be to stop the armed groups, but to stop the trafficking of the guns.
Yeah, that's very true. Because honestly, these guns are coming from like the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, like all I think I read somewhere that since the civil war started in Yemen, like weapons are just pouring into Somalia, like in East Africa. It's ridiculous, and it's these Gulf countries that are doing that. They're trying to exert their control, and they're pretty racist too. So they want to keep those countries destabilized with support from the West. So if they could just cut off that arms supply, that would help.
Well, not necessarily. For example, because Libya, which was kind of like the bulwark of, you know, Africa in terms of, you know, keeping it, I guess, to a certain extent, you know, I don't know what to say, guarded, but in a way, kind of like that, where after, you know, Libya fell during the Syrian civil war, a lot of, and you know, when Iraq kind of imploded, a lot of those weapons that the U.S. gave to them, to both the Iraqi army and the ones that they gave to their proxies in Syria, they ended up, you know, all the way down in Libya, and then from Libya, it kind of got trafficked around, you know, all the way as far down as, I want to say, like, you know, Zimbabwe, in terms of, you know, American guns that were originally in Syria. So it's not necessarily just the Arab states.
Yeah, so it's like a multi-pronged like attack that's going on in Africa. Like, we have these arms coming from everywhere. I don't know. I kind of blame the African Union that they didn't come up with like a security force because these African Union peacekeepers are not well trained. They should have, you know, probably the Russian or Chinese come and train these African Union forces and try to get a hold on the security on the continent. And you got to tell the Russian
They
Chinese
already
at
do that.
least. Really? Okay.
Yeah. If you look at the United Nations and peacekeeping mission in Africa, the majority of the peacekeeping mission is comprised of the Chinese. The Chinese have the largest contingent, and they're taking the beating inside Africa. I think they're losing like 400 guys a year, or 400 personnel a year in Africa due to peacekeeping. The most that any other country in the United Nations has. The Russians specifically don't have any members inside the peacekeeping missions in the United Nations for that very reason, that they can't afford to keep losing guys that are going to be attacked specifically by Western powers. Because that's really who's attacking the Chinese right now. That keep shooting them. It's Western-backed mercenaries that are picking off Chinese guys. And the reason why the Chinese are actually putting their people inside the United Nations is that's a part of their foreign policy, is to not put any real army logistics on the ground. They can get their guys experience by putting them in the United Nations and allowing them to actually be peacekeepers. That gives them foreign experience on the ground without actually putting on a uniform that belongs to China. So how long can China sustain this? I don't know. You may see China. You may see China actually say, "Let's go all the way and put our boots on the ground in areas that we feel are of most interest and value to us." And you see, you know, American Delta forces and Green Berets all inside Africa and working for AFRICOM they're trying to create this black military that can take on the Chinese, and that's going to bring the Chinese in full fledged.
So did you think? Because I read somewhere that they say the new warfare and we kind of see what the Russians are doing in Syria, that they use their private military contractors to fight alongside with the Assad regime, and that helped them to beat back the rebels. You think we'll see the Chinese kind of do that? That way, they can't say they're losing troops. They can just hire, because I know they have like an excess of like 100 million men. Like they can just, in the one hand, it probably would help with security in Africa, but at the second time, it would be devastating in the sense like these guys will probably never leave. They would kind of stay there and have children there. That would create another, racial clash. I know I read, destruction of black civilization, so I'm kind of worried that will happen again. So.
No, because African countries are not tolerating Chinese men coming in there and marrying off women. They're just not going to tolerate that for a long time. You even see that now. I watched some videos of some Africans actually killing some of the Chinese in there, who think they can run them out of business and by undercutting, selling these Chinese flip flops and Crocs and stuff like that.
But do you think these African governments would accept Chinese private military contractors who come and say, "Hey, we'll help you beat back this rebel group or this extremist group"? You think they would accept that, or
no, they won't accept that. Africa has enough private military corporations that are based in Africa to actually do that. I think the biggest one is called the Executive Group. They're like
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they're like the biggest private military corporation. But the problem is, what happens when Africa becomes stable? What are you going to do with all these PMCs?
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem. That they won't leave. Yeah.
Yeah, you have to just figure out a way to disarm them. The problem with Africa is they don't have as much gripe that as much as we gripe about the United States, they do have a very structured law enforcement system in place. From top to bottom. I know we hate to talk about, we hate to give, law enforcement any credit because of what they do to African American men. But if you take an objective look and just look at them from top to bottom, the CIA, the FBI, the DEA, the ATF, national security, border patrol, all types of layers of security a layer of agencies that's in place that all work in tandem with each other is very much a strategic and structured system, something that Africans can actually learn from. And what you see now in Africa is they use a sledgehammer on everything. They send the military to go and chase out Boko Haram. Realistically, they should be using the SWAT team to go and take out Boko Haram, but they don't have a SWAT team. They just have military. In the United States, you can't use the military against civilians in that fashion. So what you see is the police departments having access to MRAPs and high power rifles and other forms of hardware that allow them to engage incident response in a more militarized fashion. But that's part of the structure of the United States, right? In Africa, you don't really have that. Everybody's just swinging a hammer at playing whack-a-mole against terrorists. That doesn't work.
Yeah, that's the same problem Latin America has. Like, with these drug cartels in Mexico or like those gangs in Brazil, they just send the military in and it just makes things worse. It doesn't really solve the problem. You need to have like a police force. Like over here in the United States, if there's an issue that goes down, SWAT team, or like in New York, we have the emergency service. They go in, they take out the threat, and that's that. Only time you send in the military is if shit gets really out of control. And in Africa, like most of these armed groups, they just have small arms. Like they just have, assault rifles and a few rocket propelled grenades. But if they strengthen the police, that would help them, because a military's job is just to, kill and destroy. You need the police there to just go in, provide stability, and then also continue to provide stability.
Right, you're right. Part of the military's role is to engage other militaries. When you don't have a military to engage, you can't engage in civilians, so that doesn't work.
Yep.
Oh, I just want to make a quick correction. From earlier, I said Zimbabwe. I meant the Democratic Republic of Congo. I was hearing that. I forget the article I read this in, but they were saying that they were American weapons in Democratic Republic of the Congo that was trafficked from Syria. All right, that's the only correction I want to make.
Okay. I mean, other than that, we are in open mic session. So I thought this article was pretty good. Anybody who's in the chat should actually read this.
Yeah, I'm actually reading it right now, but I'm actually gonna be out right now. I mean, it was real dope to be part of this hangout because it's good to see other black men who follow geopolitics. I thought I was like one in a million, but it's also to see like-minded brothers here talking about geopolitics, and I'll continue to come back in the future because it's stimulating. Mhm.
Yes, sir. It was great having you.
All right, one.
All right, peace out, man.
Right.
Peace. Um, Real quick, I want to discuss. I read an article regarding the U.S. envoy meeting with the Taliban. I guess that it's been like a 17-year. It's been almost over close to 17 years in war with Afghanistan, right? So,
Hmm.
did you guys read anything on that?
That's always been going on.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
that's
That's
been
always
going
been
on for a
going on.
while. Not, I thought the U.S. being involved was relatively new, but I know for sure that the Afghan government has been in peace talks for several. I wouldn't say a few, at least a few years now, if not several.
But as far as part of the U.S. is pretty new though, right? Because I didn't know the U.S. was meeting
No,
and talking with the Taliban.
oh, they've always been talking to the Taliban. They drop bombs in one area, and then they try to negotiate in another area, right? So they're just paying lip service. Part of what the problem is that they can't stabilize the region. I mean, they can't stabilize the country because the Taliban controls 48% of it, and you can't just go around killing. Because the more you kill Taliban activists, um, the more it creates people to want to join. So now you're in the everlasting war that war against a bunch of people who really don't want you there in the first place. Like the only reason they keep growing is because you're there. So the best option for the United States is to get out, and they don't want to get out.
Why? Why do you think they don't want to get out?
Because there's resources inside Afghanistan for one, two to keep the Chinese out, three is to keep the Iranians pinned,
Mm, damn.
and four is that they're right under Russia's underbelly, so um, they
That's
can
a good
find their way
strategy,
up the
man.
Caucasus.
That's a real. I
Yeah.
never thought of it that way. That's a real good strategy. I did not see it that way. So that makes sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, and let's
Right.
not
So
forget
I
the
mean that's
U.S. created these guys in the first place, so
yeah.
they just want to complain about it now. But I believe it was what early, no, the mid 70s when I don't know who. I think this
Brzezinski.
guy was the former Secretary
Brzezinski.
of Defense, or was it 50s?
No.
Good.
Um, the big new Brzezinski, Secretary of State.
Oh yeah, yeah, where he said that, "This is God's war. We support you." Something to that effect. To the
Right.
Mujahideen, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, that's all I wanted to say.
I found one article I thought was pretty interesting, which was an op-ed from Russia Today. The Kanye effect: Black Americans declaring allegiance to Trump may mean disaster for the Democrats. Hey, um, let me see. Also going to drop it inside the drop this inside the chat so everybody else can read it.
You know, it's funny. Like Trump, well, not Trump. Kanye West is a big supporter of Trump, but I don't know. So he gets questions. People will question him, and he doesn't even know what he's talking about. He don't even know why he's really supporting Trump. I think it's all for. He said what he says is because you know, I'm free and I know people hate me, but I want to do something different. You know, it gives me power, and I'm just like, all right, but politically, I still don't understand his views. I don't understand what he stands for. I don't get it.
It's not. It's rich people. Two rich people are talking to each other. That's really all it comes down to, right? Kanye's financial his success has allowed him to financially be in circles that he typically would not have been in 2000 2001 with Rockefeller. So now he's married to a very successful socialite whose brand is worth over 100 million, who looks hot. Every other female is following her on Instagram, right? And then you have access to the White House politically speaking. You don't have a political strategy, but you have political access. So now what's happening with Kanye, he's not surrounded by the same people that he came in with during the Rockefeller days, so he doesn't have any real guidance. And he also doesn't have any real allies in his corner who can speak truth to power for him. He has the political opportunities that most black men do not have and cannot exercise and execute
Not at all.
a full strategy. A full strategy. I'm not knocking him at all. I think this is a good. I think this is good for him more than anything. He can use this to his advantage to say, "I want to run for mayor of Chicago," and he can cause an
Mm.
upset. He can easily
Yeah, I
destabilize
saw
that whole
him.
entire. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, bro. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I apologize.
No, I was saying that he could easily cause a shockwave inside Illinois because he has the popular support, and he also people are already tired of Rahm Emanuel right now. So if push comes to shove, he could easily get back in from the Trump and the Republican Party to go in there and say clean up Chicago, or I'll do it for you, right? So now he can be the guy to go in and do it. And when Trump won the election, they really did not have a post strategy because they didn't think that they were going to win.
Mm.
So everything was last minute. Everything was last second for them. It was shoot from the hip. So now
Mm.
that they see the upset happening, right? They see the upset happening for Trump. That means that somebody like Kanye come into can come into Chicago and actually take that place from Rahm Emanuel very easily. So that's
I,
very scary because
I,
once you get black men supporting Trump at 20+%, if it grows past 20%, it's over. It's over for the Democratic Party because once black men start voting like that, it's over.
Do we have any data on exactly how many men, black men are supporting
But
Trump?
yeah, I think the numbers came out some time ago, but it's in this article. Um, Basically, 12% of black men voted Republican for Mitt Romney. When Trump won, it was up to 20%. It was 19 or 18% or something like that, 19.8 or something to that effect. So if it increases past 20%, this 2020, right, the next election, it's over for the Democratic Party. Once black men go Republican, they're not coming back, and a lot of black men's views are directly par for par with the Republican Party. So
that's interesting, man, and it's funny you say that. Like a lot of people, a lot of brothers I'm talking to, uh, they're like, I think they had the same views, and they're not even like, they don't even realize it. They just from what they when I question them, and why do you think that shift has happened? Why do you think a lot of brothers are shifting more towards conservative views? Or why do you think so?
because a lot of our views have always been, you know, parallel with the Republican Party. smaller government, more efficient government, more power in the hands of the people of the republic. That's really the bullet point of being a Republican. When you really think about how the government has affected the Democratic liberal government has affected black men for the last 70 years, um, you start to see that the Democratic Party is really anti-black male, right? These same black women who vote Democratic and claim to be so liberal, they're very anti-black male. No, the policies that keep black fathers out of the home, child support, which is a government down policy. Um, when you really think about jobs, Democratic Party really doesn't support jobs for black men. Um, when Obama came out with My Brother's Keeper, the biggest opposition to that was black women, because black women are part and parcel to the Democratic Party. It's the Democratic Party, and this is just me speaking. The Democratic Party is really anti-black male. So if you're a black man and you're trying to move up in society, you're trying to move up in class, and you have this party that is, constraining you from any sort of upward mobility, you have to think to yourself, who else can I align myself with? No, I'm not saying that black men should run out there and jump on the coattails of Trump. But what I am saying is that a lot of your views from most black men, especially in the conscious community, align parallel with the Republican Party. But I have no idea why black men don't fully support it.
I think sometimes they feel like if I support, if they support it, right, they don't hang with the Democrats, they're like a sellout or something. Like that's what they're taught, but it's like it's not what it is. Like I don't know. I was Democrat. My family was Democrat, but my father, we was discussing it. He was just like, he's like they haven't done anything for us. He's like the only person you could say that done something was Clinton. That's what he explains. But I was a child at the time, so I never really had a chance to really research that. But was he really making a difference at that time of his presidency?
Mm.
Do you think so?
Wait, what was your question? Was Clinton?
Do you think Bill Clinton, as a Democrat, was he making a difference? Did he make a difference?
I think for the Clinton administration, maybe Mike can speak to that a little bit more. It was just a lot of things kind of came together really perfectly at the time. Well, other than the drug war, but in terms of the economy, a lot of economic forces, aligned just right for the country, that it was a boom period while he was the president. But go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say that the Clinton administration was harmful to black men in the 90s.
Really?
It was the 3 strikes and you're out.
Crime bill.
The crime bill, and then you take into consideration that they gave black women unfederated access to higher education, which is why you see this mass explosion of black women going to college. But the same thing was not for black men. So what I'm saying is the party has been very anti-black male, and I don't know why so many black men don't call this out, and why more black men don't become Republican, or at least libertarian, but don't, why are you supporting that? It doesn't make any sense.
Right. I think black men are kind of like an untenable, circumstance. It's kind of why they, broke off for Trump, is because on one side, Democrats are doing what they're doing, right? They're anti-black male. But then on the Republican side, for the most part, they're just openly racist, right? So it's there's no in between, for black men to go, to express their opinions, even if they agree with the Democrats on one thing and the Republicans on another thing. There's no way to, there's not enough political, force that they have where, they can force the Republicans or the Democrats to come to the table. But if enough break off, then the parties will have to come to the bargaining table, with black men. That's what I think.
I think it's incumbent upon black men to form their own political party. I mean, their own political organization that is in concert with the Republican Party itself, and then you can start negotiating. I saw Jesse Ville's comment in the chat. It says that black men's views align with the Republican Party, but the Republican Party also refuses to come to the negotiating table and are openly racist. That's true. You're true. That's very true. But what I'm saying here is, we're not even organized politically, right? We're not even organized politically. I think that we should be more politically empowered and using the Republican Party as a political infrastructure to get your message out.
Yeah, I think
Right.
we've been due for that, man. But it's like, has anybody really attempted to do that? Because
It's not exactly for black men, but I know that the former chair of the RNC, what's his name, Michael Steele, and Malcolm Nance, they've broken away from the Republican Party, and they're thinking about making a new party. But I don't know if it hasn't. I don't think it has to do with black men specifically. I think they're just trying to make their own new party. But maybe those kind of guys would be useful.
definitely,
Yeah, but
yeah,
you look at the Tea Party. Look at the Tea Party, right? So the Tea Party, even though they still are basically a offshoot of whatever came out of Sarah Palin and what's this guy that just passed away? John
John McCain.
Tom
John
McCain.
McCain. Yeah, even though they're not part of the larger majority of the Republican Party, they still are a faction within the Tea Party that still made a lot of noise and still made a difference and still was impactful. I'm saying black men could do the same exact thing. For whatever reason, they seem to tie themselves up with whatever black women's philosophies are, and that is to be anti-black male. So there is no win for them. It's a lose-lose situation going in when you're trying to align yourself up with people who don't have your best interests. And the Democratic Party has not had black men's best interests at all in the last generation.
Is there any black men right now you see it's in politics that you think, hey, this guy might have a chance if he in the future to uh do something for brothers as far as as a Republican? Have you seen anybody that stands out to you?
So there's been a few, and maybe Christian could already chime in on this. What's going on, Christian?
How's everybody doing?
All right,
Good,
so
man.
Good,
All
man.
right. You had Shelby Steele. You had what's his name? Michael.
Michael Steele.
Yeah, Michael Steele. And then you have Tim. What's his name? The brother.
What state is he from?
Damn.
Do you know the state or city?
South
Maybe we can narrow it down.
South Carolina. Tim. How did I forget his name? I just went through a brain
Oh,
fart.
I think I know him. Let me look it up. North Carolina, you
Tim
said?
Scott. I think that's his, yeah. No, South Carolina. South Carolina.
Yep, Tim Scott. Yep.
Yeah, Tim Scott. Get behind brothers like him. I would love to have a sit down with him and just pick his brain, and see what see what ideas he has. I mean, the problem with black men: one, we're not talking to each other; two, we're not organized; and three, we go against our best interests by supporting individuals and groups that are completely anti-black male. They're openly anti-black male.
Mm. That's a shame.
I think I talked about this before, but I attended a city meeting where they talked about helping black people, but the group for a small business association was basically saying we support women and minorities. And when I asked who the women were, they said it was black women. So I said, who are the minorities? LGBTQ. And I said, what about black men? Oh, well, that's different. Aren't they a minority too? Not
That's
really.
deep.
It's unbelievable, man.
Now, doesn't statistics show that in almost every measured category, which measures uh, happiness and sustainability in America, that black men come near or at the bottom?
I think I know what you're talking about.
So, but is it? So you know what I'm talking about. So there's statistics out there that say that.
Hmm.
So if that's the case, then wouldn't you want to say, okay, if this group of people is at or near the bottom at every measured, um, so whatever word I'm looking at, shouldn't you want to help them? But for some reason, black men are grouped into the whole, oh, men have the power. And that's what I ask women that talk about help women at. And they say men have the power. I'm saying, well, we don't have the power. If we don't have the power to give you anything that'll make you equal to us. We don't have that power to inculcate you with uh uh do do power or do equality to say, okay, now you're equal now. We don't have that. We don't have that capability. As a matter of fact, you all women have more power than us. So why are you still and continuously beating us over the head with Flintstone hammer? You know it. And when you talk to them about this, they want to argue with you, but these are the facts.
Because what happens with black men is we lose our agency, right? We get placed into the same category as white men, despite the fact that we don't have any political power, we don't have any economic power, and we don't have social influence to impact a narrative, right? So there is no Me Too for black men, right? So when Terry Crews came out and said, "Hey, this guy had touched me, and I feel violated too." Oh well, that doesn't count, nigga, right? He was marginalized to the side and basically told to shut up, right? Meanwhile, women who can't remember, where they was at the time that it even happened are saying, this happened to me, but that's sort of reverse sexism against black men, as well as political disenfranchisement to keep you quiet. And you need to know your place in this society because there's been a caste system created that specifically states that black men are not to have anything, which is why when My Brother's Keeper comes out, the biggest pushback comes from black women.
That's
Right?
crazy.
You had Jamila Lemieux. You had Jamila Lemieux out there stomping, talking about, what about black girls? And I said, you guys have black girls rock. You have this. You have that. And you're still not satisfied. Like, black boys don't have anything, and you all are kind of taking that from them. I can't see how this is beneficial to black men at all.
That's deep. So, what's the necessary steps to take to um, create a political? We have to do that, man. That has to be done. We got to create our own party, right? Is it best to just get behind um, a brother that's trying to do that? So in the sense of like one of these like Thomas Scott or like what do you suggest the right way to do it? Because you're well seasoned. You've seen a lot of things, right? So it's like, what do you think?
What I would say is we have to have a political affairs committee for black men.
Okay.
And in that political affairs committee, we can have um, dollar donations, right? Black men can contribute to that in the same way you put money inside of a super chat or you go to, a Patreon. Once you get enough funding, you don't need a whole lot of funding, to print flyers and you still need guys who have boots on the ground that can actually put the flyers on the windows of the cars and hand out bumper stickers and things of that nature, and go from neighborhood to neighborhood, and utilize your public resources such as your high schools and your gymnasiums and stuff like that, and actually talk and engage black men on the ground, because that's really how you're going to engage black men. You can't really engage black men in social media because they're too busy supporting left wing activists who claim now that black men are dusty beta male coons. I just don't see how that really works. So you have to go back to old fashioned boots on the ground, engaging black men, shaking hands, and pulling black men that way.
So kind of what came to me is like Andrew Gillum, right, in Florida. He didn't have a lot of money as far as his campaigning, and he got a lot done. So I think it's there,
Yeah.
man. It's due for this, man. We need this, man, because it's like no one is there to help us out right now as men, black men, especially the black men. No one's there to trying to help us out. So we gotta do it ourselves. And I think
It's
this is
always
what
been
we
like
need.
that, though, Jack.
Okay.
I think now it's finally, we got to do something. This is getting out of hand.
Definitely.
I I think Jesse Ventura in Minnesota when he ran for governor, I think he spent like $1,000 on his campaign, and he was successful with it. So
Right.
$1,000.
for us to say, yeah, he spent like $1,000 or something like that on
Yeah,
his campaign for governor.
yeah. He used to be a former wrestler, so he had that star power coming in. So he had to use too much money.
Hmm.
And then because I think the cutoff was like 5% of the polling, you would go on to the national debates. And once he came onto the national debates, it was pretty much a done deal. He won by a huge margin.
Hmm.
Right, right. We should be advocating for not so much as job program, but for actual investments. Into creating our own businesses that actually caters to Africa and actually, on the global scale, because there's a lot of black men who are out of work who came out of these factories who still know how to turn a wrench and know how to put on a bumper or a dashboard. That stuff takes a lot of skill, but we're in the technology in the fourth industrial revolution, so we need to be prepping ourselves for the greater scale. Sort of nationalistic standpoint that India is taking, Russia is taking, China is taking. Um, you see the same thing happening in Japan and so on and so forth. Like this, everybody's going into their own corners and putting their labels made in China, made in Russia, made in Japan. But when we stamp something, it has to have our heritage on it.
Of course. You know, again, just give a reference. I gotta give big kudos to that show O'Shea did, right? We talked about the 2.5 million black men are in the upper class. So I'm like, you know, there's strength there. And that's a lot of resources as well. And it's also not from there, but just from all the way to the bottom. Like there's so much resources there we can pull to make a difference. So um I think it's time, man. It's time to do something. Um I'm all up for it. And that's something I think I'm gonna try to put some work into doing, just get that going and try to support it with other brothers because it's about time, man. I'm willing to support any brother who's out here who's willing to you know put that together as well too, because it's time, man. Because there's no one speaking for us, and and uh and it's sickening to see that looking at the civil rights movement and all the what we fought for, right? It's not so much for us, but African Americans fought for it, right? In that time period, and all the result of their work go to not even to them, and that's crazy. So I
Yeah,
think it's time
they
to see.
became corrupt, once that money started rolling in. Like, what's that? a congressman from Georgia. I always forget his name. Something Cummings. You guys know?
Well, Dollar Will seems to disagree. He says in the chat, "We are already united in the Democratic Party. We need to stay there and build a platform and select better candidates. It's more work doing anything else." Well, I couldn't disagree with you more there, Brother Will. Couldn't disagree with you more. I just think that fighting the racist liberals would be it's an uphill battle, and anybody who's been in the military knows that you fight the battle downhill and not uphill. It's I think right now is a high time, to actually organize politically for the advancement of black men and not so much for the black community. I think that black men are the black community more than anything else. So if we're gonna talk about fixing the black community, you need to fix black men first, and you need to organize them under a different umbrella. And I think that different umbrella would have to be the party that is flagging red.
Right. I don't know if I've mentioned this before, but this is exactly the reason. Personally, I supported Trump, is because I knew he was gonna break the Republican Party, and Hillary Clinton, on the other side, she was gonna do something dirty and end up, breaking the Democratic Party. And now there's, big fissures in the two groups, and I think the Trump era is the best time for any kind of organization, or this is the best opportunity to make a difference, because everyone is so disorganized. If black men organize now, while everyone else is fighting each other, and all the heat isn't, historically is always on black men, but right now, Trump administration, he's put all the heat on the Latin American community, right? No one is really, for the most part, worrying about the black community, right? So we're under the radar at the moment. I don't know. What do you guys think?
I agree with you, man. I agree. So what do you think the state of the black man is going to be? And all that question in the future, you think, especially with the fourth industrial revolution, because I really feel like this is going to be, this is going to make and break us. And I think we will use this to our advantage, but it won't be a large number of people. But do you think we're going to come out this and we're going to have more rights? Or what do you think?
Real quick, I'd like to chime in on us either going to the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. If you want to stay Democrat, that's cool. Just put forth a plan for us as blacks to move forward. And if you want to join the Republican Party, do the same thing. I just want to throw that part out there real quick.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. So it doesn't matter, if there's, some good solid black brothers, on the Democratic side, as long as the agenda is the same, then even if, there's some other brothers who are on the Republican side, they're still going to vote for that agenda because it's the same agenda.
Right.
But yeah, I agree with you.
Back to what Jack was saying. I'm sorry, what was the question again?
And do you think?
Could you reword your question? It wasn't very clear the last time.
All right. So do you think? What do you see the state of black men in the future? Next 20 years. 20 years after this, with all this technology coming out, all these opportunities, do you think we're going to capture and thrive? Or, well, obviously that's what we want, but do you think? What do you think the state of the black man is going to be at, pretty much?
If we can get together in the next year, a couple of years, and actually start getting organized and start putting some stuff forward, I think we'll be a whole lot further ahead. But if we just keep talking and not doing any actions, we're pretty much going to be in the same spot.
Right. I think there is no second option. Either we do it, or I think Mike brought this up, we become the permanent underclass. After the fourth industrial revolution takes off.
Well, let's look at the chat, because Dollar Will seems to be sounding off in the chat. It says Dollar Will says, if we don't get black women on our side, then we are done. Nothing matters if black men and women are disunited. Hmm. Well, black women seem to be doing quite well in the Democratic Party. I can't speak the same for black men. So how do we focus, the best interests of black men outside of the Democratic Party? Because I don't see the Democratic Party doing anything to advance black men at all. I mean, they might give a few black men who might be a part of the five-letter alphabet group assistance, but I don't see them doing the same thing for heterosexual black men.
Yeah, I think the Democratic Party is just finished, just in general. But I guess that's just my opinion.
If enough of us move over to the Republican Party, black men, and we just start, hey, this is what we want, maybe the Democratic side will start listening to us. It's like, okay, we'll listen, and we can get some of our brothers on that side too, as long as we move us forward.
Yeah, like for example, if you ever see the coverage, on like CNBC or CNN or whatever, they're always like, oh, what do the the what do you say, those moms in Kansas City suburbs, or they're always asking that kind of the soccer moms in the suburbs, those the white women in the urban area. You never see them ever asking, oh, are the black men leaning towards Republicans or Democrats in this midterm election. It's always just assumed, oh, they're gonna vote Democrat. Even just the black people writ large, they just assume they're gonna go Democrat. But if there was any doubt, oh, will they go this way? Will they go this way? There'll be more interest, because then people are going to be like, contrary to popular opinion, people think, elections are decided by, a lot of votes, but actually the margins are very slim, all across the country. So it just takes, one group flipping either way to make a huge difference, or one subset, of the population.
All right, you troublemakers.
Yeah, what's up, Donald?
I'm just having me a nice little relaxing time, listen to the show. I'm like, wait a minute. I'm the only Democrat here. What's up with this? Explain to me how we
wait. Devin is a Democrat as well. So
okay.
And I'm not in particular any particular party. I voted 8 years ago Democrat, and it just depends on who was running. Like this year, I'm for governor in the state of Oklahoma. I might be voting Republican.
Okay. I've never voted Republican, and as long as they continue to be as overtly racist, I don't anticipate that I ever will. Now, that said, I agree with everyone's point that we're not getting anything with our vote so far in the Democratic Party. If we go to there's no reason to expect it to be any different if we go to another party. So, I mean, we haven't been the most demanding of what we want with our vote in the Democratic Party. So, I mean, we just been giving the vote away. Okay.
Right.
So, I mean, we can change our conduct within the party. I think the fact that we are already heavily concentrated in one party, that is a strength. And I think for us to move, we're only 13% of America's population. For us to start bifurcating into different parties, then we will be statistically insignificant everywhere, universally, if we do that. Stand together, I think we're stronger, but we have to get an agenda that we can be full force behind. I think that the Republicans did a great job when they came up with diversity, and now this is back, back in the 80s, and things became went away from minority, which was black, and then to diversity, and then they put the focus on women, and everyone basically that was not white male and not black man. That's when you got all this broad definition of diversity that minimized improving things for black men. And the black community has never stood up to challenge that movement in American politics. The only voice I've ever heard speak on the matter is Claude Anderson, and that's a shame. I've never heard any other black politician, and we're talking decades now, stand up and talk about how we got bamboozled publicly. I've never heard it. Claude Anderson, the only public figure, but he's not a politician. So we could hold the Democrats' feet to the fire on that, because the party pushing civil rights and equality, that's been the Democratic Party, and our leadership, our black leadership, got compromised with this this rainbow idea, and this unwillingness to stand up and say, I have a self-interest as a black American, and I'm not going to compromise my right to equality in the interest of advancing someone else. I'm not going to do that. But we keep wanting to be, take the high road, even if it, obliterates ourselves. There's something wrong with us, and we gotta get the pride to stand up and represent ourselves, and not feel like, like we're being racist or short-sighted because we don't sacrifice for some other people who don't sacrifice for us. I mean, we should be looking for common ground with other races and not, or groups, and not looking at how much we can compromise. We've lost the confidence in this country to stand up as black people and represent our own interests. So that problem exists in us wherever we go. So whether we are in Democrats, whether we're Democrat or Republican or independent party, that lack of pride is there, and we have to get to that kind of boldness to say, I count. This is what I want. I don't care who don't like it.
You make some good points, Darwell, but I guess maybe the disconnect between what we're saying, what you're saying, is that you're talking about something that might be a step 2, but we need to focus on step 1, which is
I'm saying
organizations and agendas first before any political parties.
I agree with you when you said agenda. We're already in a political party. We already have a great deal of power in the Democratic Party, but we won't use it. That's just a change in mindset and value system. We're already there. It's much easier.
Not even just that, but first it's agenda, and then 2, you're right. Our population numbers, you said it was 13%, right?
Yeah.
So that's when we focus on being a donor class or a donor group more so than just voting, right? That's where the real political power comes from. Because there are a lot of other groups who are even less in population than us, but wield significantly more political power, beyond any, their sheer number of voting power.
And how did they do that? I think they did that.
Agenda and money.
But even above all of that, the most powerful thing that these other groups did was compromise black people. Because black people want to be, you name the group, we in it. And we in all these other groups, and we place the interest of our membership and our loyalty to these other groups above the black agenda. And that's something we have to fix culturally. You can name, the I guess the LBGTQ whatever. We in that. You can name, we got feminist issues. We in that. You can get into, Green parties. We're in that. You name it. We got some other damn group that we're in that we will carry that flag, but we won't carry a black flag. Now, that's a mental problem, and we're gonna be crazy like that wherever we go. So we got to deal with why we won't stand up and represent ourselves. Why do we feel that we have to justify representing ourselves? We are self-effacing. It's something mentally wrong with us.
Anything you guys want to add?
Is it something wrong with us, or is it just that we're not organized enough?
Or
I
is
think
there a
it's
lack
something
of
mentally
political
wrong with us.
literacy?
There you go.
Yeah, civics
Even
isn't really taught in school. Oh, good, Dollar.
I think okay, I guess we would have to disagree on that. Yes, we could stand to be more educated more on the process, but even after you get to that, we still won't stand up and represent ourselves. Even on the micro level, on your job, black folks don't stand up and represent themselves. They talk about crap in the break room. They tell you 99 flavors of unfairness is going on the job, but they won't do anything about it. When you say, let's have a group meeting with management, or let's write a letter that we all sign, nobody wants to sign anything. When you say, hey, let's pass the hat and go talk to a lawyer just to get some guidance, nobody wants to chip in. Nobody wants to do anything. This has been our problem for decades. So we keep waiting for saviors. I mean, we had a plan in the 60s, which was guilt based. Let's go on TV, use the technology, and let the water hose, let them spray water on us and let the dogs bite us. Let's bring the children out there and play on the sympathy of people saying, wow, look at what these racist whites are doing to women and children. This was a strategy that Martin Luther King used. They thought all this out. Okay, and it worked, but it worked to a point that at some point, we've never come up with a second strategy since then. This is how long we've been before we went back at the table and said, okay, guilt doesn't work anymore. They don't care anymore. Rodney King issue, that beat down signified the end of the guilt play, because that was on tape. Now, what strategy have we come up with since then? We've been quiet as church mice. We don't want to stand up and represent ourselves. Now, I'm going to go back to that Martin Luther King era again. I don't want that point to get missed. Those were kids, teenagers and kids out there. The adults were at work. That was a youth-led organization. Martin Luther King was what, like 29, 20, in his late 20s. So he would have been the equivalent of a millennial. So it was a youth-led organization, marching with a bunch of kids. So we couldn't get the adult population to lead it then, and we still can't do it. It's always been upside down in our community, where the young people say, I ain't gonna take this shit. That is our history, and it's on you. It's on you now, millennials. I mean, it's messed up. Everything is backwards with us. Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was just going to say I blame the boomers.
I don't think you can pick one generation. I think it's cultural, and every generation failed. Yeah, okay. Yeah. Well, no, you know what? But I do want to address it, because that is a. I think that most millennials think that way, and I would say that is the Black America's tradition, is to fail. The boomers didn't fail to no greater degree than any previous generation, and the millennials will fail just like the rest if you sit around and just blame other generations all the time. You know, we don't have a crystal ball. No generation was born with a crystal ball. We prepared the current generation to fight the known problems, but things keep changing. There's technology, and the racists see, we act like racism isn't real. We go, oh, you into this Illuminati stuff. Yes, there are groups of people that sit around and actually make plans about how to disenfranchise black people. We got to get real about that. I listened to a show today, it was O'Shea, people, I understand O'Shea's point, about self, accountability and all that. He's right. But we can't dismiss the fact that this high level organization is taking place to put us in this position. So we haven't stood up with the boldness, and accept that we are at war. You were born into war. But we have, young people now that act like they were born into some kind of paradise and somebody owed them peace to all their solutions. I mean, you're in a multi-generational war. And your parents we thought that the solution was better education. Now I'm let me rephrase that. The mainline Black Americans thought that education was the great solution to everything. I mean, I was pro-Black as a teenager. Okay, I was with the radical folks then. We knew that was crap. We knew it was crap, but that was not the dominant opinion. So now we have these well-educated millennials, and they're still facing racism. But we couldn't get the mainstream of Black America out of that denial, thinking that America's not really that racist. We just need to be better prepared. That's crap.
Right. No, I think I would disagree on one point.
So where do we go now that we know it's crap? We're trying to make this country, what we have going for us in maybe y'all agree, don't disagree. I think that the environment is on our side. I think that America, with this birth rate decline, the decline of the white population, America cannot afford racism anymore. At some point, I think our best hope is if mainstream America of all races, when they realize that it's for mainstream, our only hope is for mainstream America to realize that it's all hands on deck for America. America is not going to make it if America does not fully maximize the best of its citizens. It's not enough white people in America if you just relied on white people for them to run America and have everyone else that's not white in menial positions. America needs us. America can't make it without us. I believe that it's enough white folks that's going to come to that realization, because the population is changing too fast. It's changing faster than we knew. The 10-year-old child in America right now, the 10-year-old white child in America is a statistical minority. I didn't know that was going to happen in my life. So 10 years from now, that kid's going to be a sophomore or junior in college, something like that. And that white kid is going to be a minority in America, and they're going to be voting. They're going to be an adult. The world is changing fast. And at some point, white people are going to realize that there is no America with treating Black people and Black men second rate. We just can't make it. Oh, and the country won't. And if the country fails, this is why I'm a Pan-Africanist. Black people have to get in our mind. We can't be tied to this country. If America goes down, we shouldn't have the mindset we go down with America. You better start exploring Africa and some other places. Your plan B is to get the heck out of this country if America is too stupid to save itself.
I think that's much more likely. Oh, go ahead.
No, I just want to read a couple of comments from the chat. So Jesse Veal says that, truthfully, Black men would be a more valuable donor base than a voter base, because Black women already outnumber us and we have a significant amount of ineligible voters. But I read some stuff today about ex convicts is being put on the ballot to actually be able to vote now.
Yeah,
I
one
know they
state.
talked about it in
One
Florida.
state. Yeah, Florida. That's what's Florida, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I don't know if there's some other states decided to go ahead and chip in on that though.
I think a lot of other states they don't automatically re-enfranchise people, but there is a system in place. I think Florida was one of the few states that had no way for a person to become re-enfranchised later on. And then if you couple that with, a lot of people don't know that they can get their voting rights back, even after a felony, but that there's just a process to it. So I think that's some of the complications.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say again, my main point, you guys may disagree with this, is that we lost when white women wrestled black women away from us and turned black women into feminists more than black. The next time you ask the black women you have access to, what's the bigger issue for them, black issues or women's equality? And
it's women's equality.
There you go. They either say women's equality or they sit there stunned like, well, I don't know, like it's a damn tie. That's the problem. That was not the case. You wind the clock back a couple of decades. That was not the case. White women made a definite plan to create this kind of confusion in black women. We got to unconfuse them. Because if we can do that, then that would wrestle a lot of power away from white women. White women took that mantle. All those civil rights gains that we got, white women went out there and wrestled them right back to the white race. Took them right back.
Well, are you saying that we can bring back the same women who say Dusty Beta Male Coon into our camps? I just don't see that happening.
I don't think that one. No, we can't bring those women back to think like that. I don't think that's most black women. I really don't. I think black men on YouTube have just found our voice to be able to say these types of things, because there is no place in a public square where we welcome them to say these types of things. So, but as black women are hearing us make our argument, they are being affected by it. That's why you see all these women lurking on O'Shea and Obsidian's channel and BGS channel. That's why you see it, because they never heard this argument. It's not allowed on television. So right. We just keep banging it like we bang. I'm sorry, say it again.
So why flag the videos?
Those are extremists.
Those are the ones the extreme ones you're talking about. I don't think that represents most black women. And in fact, the younger black women seem to be more influenced by what the men are saying, because the older black women, I don't see them change. Younger black. Oh, I would say. Older Gen Xers, baby boomers. We're talking mid-50s and up. Mm-hmm. I don't put much stock in them making radical change in their belief. They might be too far gone. But younger women feel this gender divide, and they don't like it. They ready for some kind of truce.
Yeah, I would just disagree on one part, Dollar Will, and that's the part where you said it was backwards. I'm not sure what you were referring to, but I think the young generation is always the ones who are going to, either protest or make some change, Because if I'm not mistaken,
I'm saying it was backwards because the older generation should have been out there too.
No, I think that happens with any movement. The older generation will sit back, and the young generation will take the lead in terms of doing the protests, in terms of making the change. I think that's normal. I wouldn't say that's just black people. That's just writ large.
Okay. I have to look at that. I have to do some research on that. But yeah. Well, if that's the case, that it's normal for young people to push change, then what are millennials complaining about? Then that means that millennials are out of line for criticizing boomers if it's just so normal.
Well, I think they're gonna criticize them regardless, but at the same time, they gotta, also do stuff at the same time,
Yeah, because where's the I'm not I'm not trying to turn this into banging on the millennials, but you guys need a movement. You need something.
Well, we do have one.
Something without saying, well, without necessarily making enemies of previous generations. Nobody's stopping you guys from going out there and doing whatever you're doing. When you said you do have one, where? What is it?
Do you mean a movement in terms of nationwide?
Yeah.
That's happening a little bit. There's a couple of them, and they're kind of spread out. A lot of this, I guess, red pill stuff, MGTOW stuff that's, influencing, the politics right now.
Okay.
That's from the millennials. A lot of on the Democratic side, the people who call themselves, progressives, those were also millennials. The Occupy Wall Street, millennials. I think even the Tea Party is millennials, I think.
I would say the Occupy Wall Street was because it was demonstrative. It was in your face. You pointed out enemies. It wasn't really well thought out, but it was a good start.
Or well executed.
It was a start. Because you drew a battle line. You knew what you didn't like. Now the hard work is finding what you do like. Because it's like when you're young, it's easy to be reactionary and say what you're against. It's the difficult part is to say what you want to replace it with, what you're for. But you got involved, so I think you need to. It's gonna be messy. It's not gonna be perfect, okay? You're gonna make mistakes. You're gonna make mistakes that the next generation behind you gonna criticize you for. That's just the way it goes. That's just the way it goes.
Life.
That's just life, okay? But get in the game, get off the porch, and y'all got to keep chopping at it. But I don't really like to bang on millennials. I'm not one of these guys that say y'all are lazy or this and that. I don't believe any of that. I think y'all, everybody knows I'm a practitioner of technical analysis. I think y'all were just born at the wrong time. Y'all were born at the mature cycle of the the business cycle. It's nothing you could have done. Okay, there's so until we have a contraction, a correction, as it were, and we get into another growth cycle, you just gonna have it rough. Stuff costs too much, rent's too high, we got too much of everything, we've overproduced everything. We got to have this deflationary cycle. We got to crash this market. It's going to happen. And on the other side of it, you guys are going to win. But you might be a little older, when it happens. But, your day will come. And you'll inherit all of this property that your parents had because they can't take it with them.
Right.
So you guys will be all right. Y'all gonna have, y'all gonna have. It's a lot of boomers that got several homes. Okay, and in this bus cycle, y'all gonna be sitting there young with all this property that you inherit. And when you go, as you get towards your retirement, all that property will have been back, reached back into a boom cycle. But your name will be on the deed. The property got to go somewhere.
All right.
So I'm optimistic.
Go ahead, Mike.
All right. With that being said, we're gonna close out. It is top of the hour, to 12. So, be back for Friday economics episode 76, and then we'll have another hangout on Saturday night as well. The episode 77.
All right.
Thank you all for joining us. And we are out.
All right. See you guys on Friday.
All right.